Just I'll start the live show now.
Okay.
That's pressing the button. All right, we are live. Hello, everybody. It's been just a day, and we're back here on the Keeping Karlsson Network YouTube channel. And now I'm not here with Dom and Brian. I got my Sharks pal buddy here, Victor. How's it going?
It's going awesome, Elon. So good to talk to you. Good to be back. This is a show I look forward to every year. It's become a tradition, and I love
Yeah,
it.
totally. But wait, save it. This is the pre-show. So you got to
Pre-show.
save you all your excitement for being on the show for the actual. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, here, but I might as well. Yeah, let me just start it now. I'll get going here. All right. So, thanks, Mythic Lords. Who is that? Someone I know? Let us know who you are. But yeah, thanks, Keenan, John. Thanks for joining, everybody. Shaw. Oh, we got a fun crew. Oh, by the way, John, if you go, John, so you guys are the Sharks. I am thinking of John Reed, but if you go to keepingkarlsson.com/live, Victor, only if you're interested, you can see the chat that's going. But okay. All right, so I'm going to start the recording now. Okay, start there. Start here, record on this computer. Okay. All right.
I'm trying to find the link. What did
it's
you
just
say?
keepingkarlsson.com/live.
Oh, .com/. I forgot that part.
Yeah, so that'll get.
Although last time when I did this, I got so distracted by everybody in the chat that
so maybe
I
you
missed something. Okay, there we go.
Cool. Yeah, this is a rare show for me. I guess I'll say this all on the show actually. All right, so I'll just get started then. Are you good to go?
Do it.
All right, and I'll edit also. So like if there's anything you want me to retake or whatever, just let me know. All right. Yes! Welcome everybody to another episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast, the longest running fantasy hockey podcast in the world, hosted by a guy who thinks there's only like one clear frontrunner for the Calder this year, but I'm very excited to learn about the 25 other players that I'm clearly overlooking. I'm your host, Dylan Dubrovsky, and with me for this special annual tradition episode. We already did our annual tradition with Dom. We recorded that yesterday. Maybe we'll give this episode a few days to breathe, so maybe you heard that a few days ago, but another tradition in September is we have to bring on our very good friend from the Fantasy Hockey Life podcast and longtime patron and friend of Keeping Karlsson. Victor Nuno is here to talk about Calder candidates for this season because he is the prospect expert. Every single time someone asks a question on our Discord about if someone should have Edvinsson or I don't know, Brent Clark in their Dynasty League, who they rank higher, I always just tag Victor, go, well, I'll give you my opinion, but here's the opinion you probably should care more about. It's Victor Nuno. I think I already said your name. Welcome back to Keeping Karlsson, Victor.
Thanks, Elon. So awesome to be back. This become one of my favorite traditions of the year for sure. Super excited to talk rookies. That's one of my favorite things to do, as you know. And I must say, your takes on that the Dynasty and prospects have been pretty spot on. So well done there.
Hey, well, I mean, I listened to the Fantasy Hockey Life podcast, so that obviously helps. But yeah, soon I'm going to have to test that challenge. So I got into all this stuff when you invited me to join your Dynasty League a couple years ago. And as I think I may have mentioned once or twice, I won year one. Unfortunately, last year I lost in the finals. The team that won, Shane and Adam, just totally... I still think, Victor, you should have vetoed that trade where they got Ovechkin and Marchand at 50%. We don't have time to get into that. So anyways, but eventually my team's getting older and older because I was clearly going for the win. So soon I'm going to have to go into rebuild mode and like really learn what it's like. All these guys that we're going to talk about in this episode, I don't have any of them on my Dynasty team. But of course, the fun thing about this show is maybe you're going to be talking about some players that people should even be looking at in one-year leagues, because last year, guys like obviously our Calder winner, Moritz Seider or Lucas Raymond or like Zegras, like some of these guys ended up being like real impact players in fantasy right from year one. So that's why we have you here today. And why don't you tell us about, I don't know, how should we start? I have so much I want to talk to you about, but maybe you could start by just telling us your general plan of like, set the table for what we're going to be doing in this episode, how you've organized it.
Yeah, I will do that. And maybe do you want to look back at last year real quick? Because I think that is probably useful as well. Because we did I didn't pick the winner last year, although the previous year I nailed it with Kaprizov. But last year I had Zegras, and he finished second, so that was pretty good. I did talk up Moritz Seider last year, and we did talk about how you should probably take him in round 10 through 15 because he was going to be good right off the bat. And I underestimated how good he was. He was very good. He was like 5th ranked defenseman in a lot of categories. So yeah, that was pretty good. Of course, there were a lot of guys that kind of came out of nowhere that I didn't think would make the team and made big impacts. But most of the guys that I talked about, were on the ballot. So that was good. But this year, what we're gonna do is we're gonna go through the odds, sort of like we usually do. And so we have odds from a sports betting dime, and we're gonna kind of look at the favorites and where I have them ranked, and we'll kind of walk through. And then there's some guys that are unranked that we'll talk about. And of course, we'll also be relating this to how valuable these guys might be in a redraft league. And of course, we can touch on their dynasty value and anything like that.
Yeah, sounds like a great plan. It's always fun to go through and see like who the odds makers are totally sleeping on. And not that this is like a betting podcast or anything, but it's always fun to kind of go through who they think, who Vegas thinks are the clear favorites versus the fantasy hockey life expert here. Last year, I remember thinking that actually it was likely going to be Cole Caulfield winning the Calder, just because like to me it was so just like, okay, he's already good, like clearly going to slot in on line one, power play one. Like I feel like that's just such an advantage for a rookie to just right away be on their team's top line. I obviously wasn't able to foresee that he'd get sent to the minors for a chunk of the season, and Ducharme would, I don't know, they wouldn't click together. But I feel like if Caulfield had played the full season like he did in that second half, he definitely would have had a very strong chance to win this thing. And yeah, Seider was, I guess no one expected that he'd jump right to power play one. Like we all thought he'd play big minutes and like, be good for peripherals. But the fact that he got on the power play and was able to get all those points, that was something that a lot of people didn't expect. And now this year we've got a new Detroit rookie defenseman that I'll be curious to get your take on and see if like that power play one spot for Seider is one that he's going to hold for a long time, or if it's maybe in jeopardy. Maybe another, I don't know. Let me mention a couple things really quickly, just off the bat. First of all, Keeping Karlsson, proudly presented by DobberHockey.com. I believe the Fantasy Hockey Life podcast is also presented by Dobber Hockey. So we're just two Dobber bros here. And yeah, so check it out for if you haven't done your draft yet, you got to get that guide. They've got the projections. They got a whole write-up. We did an interview with Ian Gooding a couple weeks ago about the Dobber guide, and it was really good. So also check out that episode from Keeping Karlsson, and yeah, get that guide at dobberhockey.com. Also, Victor, I believe that you have started your draft for your Cupful division, right? Or Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Patron Fantasy League. Victor's in it. I see you're in Tier 4 Småland. How many picks have you made so far?
Just one. Kucherov fell to me at 8. I was pretty happy about that. Not going to argue. Yeah, I know that there's injury history, but can't argue with that points per game. Yeah, I was in Tier 2 last year, and I had just a rough time with poor decisions and bad luck. But yeah, I'm excited to kind of claw my way back up to the top as far as I can go.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're a really smart player, and last year was so hard with all the injuries and like COVID postponements. Like, a lot of people like that are smart players just got dealt a raw hand, and so yeah, the fact that you got Kucherov at 8, I think, is a sign that you're going to have a pretty good team, because that's obviously really nice. I think that I would have expected Kucherov to go closer to like 6 or 7. Like I guess yeah, the big debate to me is like I feel like you go Makar at 5, and then it's either like Kaprizov or Kucherov at 6 and 7. So I guess there must be some other player that I'm not thinking about that must have.
Yeah.
Like, who else went there before?
Ovi went 8. Ovi went 7. Yeah, that was the hiccup. You're totally right. Makar went 5th. Kaprizov 6th, which I haven't ranked 3rd. Kaprizov.
Oh wow.
So yeah, but yeah, mostly it kind of fell as you would think. No goalies have gone yet, and I'm tempted, but I'm probably won't do it.
Well, yeah, so there are a lot of goals you could get later. We had a lot of fun goalie chat with Dom about like, yeah, look at your Matt Murrays and your Georgievs. If you want to try to wait and get a starting goalie later, that could potentially be good, but obviously more risk the longer you wait. But okay, I guess we are not going to talk about goalies. We can't talk about all these players who've already played a year because we've got all this Calder talk to get to. But I did bring up the Cupful, so I'll just say for people listening, if you're already playing in the Cupful and you're registered in a league, then like continue good luck in your drafts. Please do your best to keep these slow drafts going. If you know you're going to be away for a while, you could always turn on auto draft or something, fill up that queue. If you haven't gotten into a Cupful league, you could still sign up, become a patron of Keeping Karlsson, and then you could get in the wait list. And Kevin, our intrepid Cupful coordinator, is working hard to try to fill more divisions if we have enough people in the wait list. So you can just check all that out at keepingkarlsson.com/patron. But okay, with that, that's it. Okay, Victor, it's all you. This is like one of those sweet episodes for me where I didn't have to do much prep at all, except for just kind of know about hockey and then set up the live stream and the recording here. And now I get to sit back and people hopefully will enjoy just hearing me react to you telling me about the various players. So what are we starting with? Just the top odds guys according to Sporting Dime?
Yep.
All right, let's do it.
Oh, you want me to list them? Sure. Okay. So
I mean, you don't have to list them all, but you can just like start the whatever you want to do.
Yeah, well, you can always say it too, but at plus 400, we'll start there. So we have at plus 400, we got two guys. So we'll start with those two, Owen Power, Mason McTavish. So those are by far the odds most likely players. So we'll start first with Owen Power, who was Matty Beniers' teammate at Michigan, first overall pick 2021. He was just under a point per game there in his sophomore season. He was also really good in the Olympics, did not look out of place, got called up at the end of the year and had 3 points in 8 games for the Sabres. A lot of people who watched those games closely agreed that he did not look out of place. He looked like he was ready. He's a big mobile defender with a high offensive IQ. And I'm going to mention this a couple of times, but we have our own scouts over at Fantasy Hockey Life. So I'm going to not read their whole scouting report because we have videos and full reports for all these guys there, but just a couple of clips or, highlights. One of our scouts there had just modest concerns about his compete level and attention to defensive effort at times, but that's pretty common for a young player. So not really any huge concerns with Owen Power. He's definitely NHL ready. The only thing I would say, Elon, which I'm sure you could agree with, is that Rasmus Dahlin is there and he's very good and probably will get all the opportunity. So I'm just not sure, how many goals Buffalo is going to score, how good the offense is going to be, and how good the opportunity is going to be for Owen Power. He still looks like a star in the making, and his Corsi against and expected goals and all that in his limited sample size at the end of the season in Buffalo was all really good. In fact, if you look at expected goals differential, he was the best defenseman on a per 60 basis in his limited sample size on Buffalo already, which is like remarkable. Of course, guys like Dahlin and Colin Miller and those guys had harder matchups, but that's still pretty incredible for such a young defenseman. So Power is second on my list. And just because of the slight lack of opportunity, as I said, but the skill is there. And it's also harder for a defenseman to win. Of course, we just saw a couple defensemen win recently, Makar and then last year Seider. And, Elon, there's only been 2 back-to-back defenseman winners. That was back in 62-63 and 63-64. Some guy named Ken Douglas and Jacques Leperrier. So I'm not sure that they're going to do that again, right? So that's a little bit of the concern. So, but at plus 400, I think you could make far worse bets. So what do you think about him being second on my list and then those odds?
Well, yeah, the thing is, I think that like Makar and Seider, what made them stand out is they got right to the top power play and were able to put up like 40 plus, in Makar's case, like even like whatever, 60 plus point season. So I just want, in terms of pace, like I just wonder if even like it's kind of sounds like the way you're describing Owen Power is kind of how you were describing Seider last year, back when we thought he was going to be like a big minute eater, maybe be good for peripherals, maybe like play shorthanded, help his team a lot, but not necessarily have enough offense because he's not going to be on the top power play. Like Seider just had to beat out Phil Hronek, so Power's got a bigger obstacle with Rasmus Dahlin unless they go 2 defensemen on the power play. So I think that I agree with you that to me, he wouldn't be even second on my list, because the way I would go about placing these bets, I want to think of like who has a good chance to like really break out. And I almost like, obviously the player's talent takes a lot, like matters a lot, but also like the opportunity that their team is going to give them. Like, Kaprizov, when he won, like he earned it, obviously getting on the top line, top power play, like being the star on the team. And like Seider was the clear top defenseman on Detroit. So yeah, I just feel like Dahlin is going to get it in Power's way. But yeah, in terms of fantasy, are we thinking that Power is kind of like what we were expecting from Seider last season in terms of like, are you expecting like lots of hits, lots of blocks, decent number of shots, and, whatever, maybe not 45, 50 points, but at least like 35, 40?
Yeah. So the nice thing is that I can look at what he did in college and kind of projects his hit shots and blocks. And so on my prospect ranking spreadsheet, I have everyone listed out in terms of their bash, right? Block, shots, hits. And he was excellent in his college. So he should have very high bash. Can he translate that to the NHL? Of course, is always hard to say. And of course, you can look at his prorated stats from his limited time in Buffalo, but I'm not sure that an 8-game sample size is, super accurate. But yeah, I do think his bash is going to be good. I do think he's draftable in redraft leagues. I was pretty conservative saying around 10 through 15 for Seider last year. And honestly, I think that's where I would go this year. Seider, as you mentioned, he looking around that Detroit team, there weren't a whole lot of big obstacles to overcome. I think Power is probably already the second best defenseman on that Buffalo team, but I don't think he's anywhere near what Dahlin is right now. So yeah, I don't think he's going to get the best opportunity, but I do really believe in him as the individual talent. That's why he's so high on my list. And I do think he'll make a pretty strong case. It's just, yeah, the opportunity, he's kind of blocked, he's kind of blocked, and maybe they go two defensemen. That would be interesting, and that would certainly help him, but I do think he's very draftable. I wouldn't want him as my first or second defenseman, but as a third or fourth defenseman on my, say a cupful roster, I think you could do a lot worse than that.
Yeah, for sure. I'm not leaving him undrafted when I get to the tier 1 auction draft in a couple of weeks. If I could get him for a buck at the end, I'll be super happy. I don't know how much I'll spend, but I definitely wouldn't want to have him just because of that like high floor, because of the peripherals. All right, so you said it's Owen Power and then Mason McTavish with the also tied for that plus 400 odds. For people who care, like plus 400 basically means 4-1. You bet 100, you win 400. Okay, so that's what those odds mean. Those are the best odds, or I guess the worst odds, I guess, depending on how you want to look at it for these two guys. What do you think about McTavish coming off a really strong World Juniors tournament? People have been high on him already before that, but I didn't expect him to have the highest odds of any forward. I thought there was a couple other forwards that would have been higher.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I have him a little bit lower. We'll get to that in a second. But yeah, he was a third round pick back from 2021. Remember, he came off that junior season where there was no OHL, and so he didn't get to play, but he was amazing at the U18s that year in his draft season. And he was pretty great this year. He played a lot of hockey. I think if you just track who played the most hockey in this last year, it was probably Mason McTavish, because he started with the Ducks, then he got some games with the Gulls. He went back to Peterborough and then was traded to Hamilton, helped them win the OHL championship, took a break in the middle to go to the Olympic Games. Then after winning the OHL championship, losing in the Memorial Cup, unfortunately, he went to the U20 World Junior Championship that was in August this year and was amazing. I mean, everyone's going to remember that save on the goal line at the U20. And if for some reason you haven't seen that, you have to go look on Twitter. It was remarkable. Batted out of midair. The Finns thought they won, and he saved the game and then helped them win in overtime. And even though he did that, he was also the tournament leading scorer and MVP. So yeah, he had an incredible year. The problem is that the top six in Anaheim is a bit crowded. They got pretty decent centers now. They just got Ryan Strome. Zegras is there. Adam Henrique is, still an NHL player. Lundestrom has come a long way. I don't know that he can fit at center right now, but maybe if he moves to the wing, he can get some top six times. A big concern of mine with Mason McTavish is that he's always been bigger and stronger than everybody. I mean, he's 210 pounds, 6'1". He's been physically imposing on the smaller CHL players, but that isn't really going to happen in the NHL. He's not going to physically overwhelm most of his opponents. He's probably still bigger than some of the guys. Unfortunately, because of his birth date, though, it's either NHL or junior, which, I mean, I guess he could win the Memorial Cup, but there's really nothing else to prove in the CHL for him. So I think he's going to be in the NHL the whole season. I'm just not sold on his ability and his opportunity to translate that. Everyone else in my top 10 had significantly tougher and physical competition, either professional in the NCAA. So that's part of why I moved Mason McTavish down to 10. And in his limited sample size with the Ducks, he actually was not very good in terms of his Corsi and expected goals. So I'm just not sure that he's a good bet at plus 400. Like you said, 100 to win 400. I'm not sure that is super likely. So I bumped him down to 10th. But I do really believe in him as a strong prospect. I just think he might need another year and a little bit more opportunity to really get all the way there.
Yeah, he's only 19 years old, and like you said, he's supposed to be a center, and he's behind Zegras and Ryan Strome now. So it just doesn't see. And Anaheim also doesn't need to even go for it. Like, why not just send him down? Maybe not. Well, I guess you're saying like you think he's going to play. I could see them trying to tank, but not burn. I don't know. I'm curious why a team that knows they're not going to win, why burn a year of the ELC? But I guess it's a entertainment product, and they're trying to sell tickets. And McTavish is an exciting guy that people are into, so maybe he'll play. But yeah, 19-year-old that doesn't look like he's going to at least start the year as a top six guy unless he moves to the wing, like you said. Just doesn't seem like a great bet compared to some guys we're going to get to pretty soon. So yep, I'm with you there that he's not going to be someone that I'm going to be betting on.
Someone I might bet on is the next odds is plus 550. Matty Beniers. He was the second overall pick behind Power in 2021. He was awesome at Michigan this year. 43 points in 37 games as a sophomore. He also played for the US at the Olympics, was frankly one of their better players, that weird mixture of Olympics with NHL and other like international players. He played 10 games for the Kraken and was nearly a point per game. I heard you talking with Dom about this the other day, and how the model spit out a number that was pretty high, and it seems reasonable. He's got all that opportunity. I don't know that he's going to be a point per game all season. You might have to regress that a little bit, but what he did in those 10 games did not look terribly unsustainable, and he's going to have tons of ice time. He might already be the best center on the Kraken, which is both an indictment of the centers on that team and a gold star for his ability. I wanted to just mention a little bit from our FHL scout Jeremy on Beniers, just talking about how he's such a consistent 200-foot player. He's so good at closing down space and supporting teammates. He's got a really good shot, and he's so fast and really good at defensively, two-way. His skating ability is great, and his shot is effective, as I mentioned. And looking at hockey prospecting, he looks like a few really good stars. Eric Stahl is someone that kind of stands out as also kind of a strong two-way player. So, I mean, I just think Beniers is ready to step into the NHL and not struggle too much. The opportunity is there for him to be even the 1C already. I know that's tough and it might take him a little bit of time, but I could really see him at least sticking in the top 6 and having really good players. I mean, they got Burakovsky, Bjorkstrand, Gordon, Tanev were injured a lot of last year, and McCann is still there. Obviously, Eberle and Schwartz. They got a pretty solid, top 9. So I think we'll have good players to play with, and I can't imagine he won't be on the top power play. So I know it's pretty, the odds are not super long, but at 550, I think that's pretty good value. He's number 1 on my list. So I really like Matty Beniers here. I think if you wanted to take one of the higher likely odd players and place a bet on it, he's probably a decent one.
Yeah, I totally agree. He's the one I was referring to at the top. I mean, the fact that he's going into the year, like you said, expected to be the top center on this team that's now looking improved. And by the way, like the Kraken weren't even that bad last year. Like I've seen some stats, put out that like they would have actually been like a potentially contending team if they had just gotten league average goaltending. Their goaltending just sunk them. But yeah, like now if they, obviously they have the same goalie, so we'll see what happens there. But hopefully that doesn't affect Beniers too much. But yeah, they've just like improved. Like you said, Gourde was injured a lot. Now he's there. He's potentially could play with like Schwartz, Eberle, like McCann, Burakovsky, Bjorkstrand. Like there's no shortage of good wingers for him to play with. And he already showed that he can come up into the NHL. It was obviously the end of the season. Who knows like how hard the teams he was playing against were trying. I'd have to go back and look at the game log there. But I feel like, without any other information, we're just looking at a guy who has a super high draft pedigree. He was taken, second overall. He's got a super great track record in terms of his in the games he played in the NHL. He's got a super great what's the word? Deployment projection being at the top of the lineup. So like why not bet on him? I don't get why he's not the top pick according to the odds makers. To me, it's like how I felt about Cole Caulfield last year, which didn't work out. But I don't think it'll happen again. Like I think that was pretty unlikely that he was going to get sent to the minors. And I think that Beniers also probably won't get sent to the minors because the one place where they're maybe not that deep, they look like they have really good wingers, but they don't really have such amazing centers. So that's why Beniers could just climb to the top. It's not like Alex Wenberg is going to take over. I guess Yanni Gourde could play center, but he's not really like a top line center. He's more of like a guy you want to have in your middle 6. So yeah, to me, it's like everything's lining up to be like, this is the clear pick. So yeah, I'm with you. But let's see who else. I'll be curious to hear who you think are like you said you have Owen Power at number what? Number 2?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
No, I totally, and there are some big differences with Caulfield and Beniers, obviously not just the fact that Beniers is much taller and bigger and stronger, but his two-way game is already at least NHL average, if not better. And so that's something you certainly couldn't say about Caulfield. So you don't look at Beniers and think, oh yeah, this is a guy that can't hang it two-way in the NHL. No, he already can, so that's not really going to be an issue. The biggest concern for me has always been with Beniers is he's so good that he ends up becoming like a Yanni Gourde because he's so good two-way that they put him in more of a defensive role and decrease offensive zone starts and don't put him on the power play. I don't think that's going to happen because I think he has more offensive upside than a guy like Gourde, but that is always the worry. So it is possible, but yeah, I don't think there's any way Beniers doesn't play the whole season with the Kraken. And like you mentioned, they need to sell tickets. They need to get excitement for their fans. And you're right. It was pretty much almost all Grubauer last year why they were so bad. So if they could be just a little bit closer to average, they have a strong defense. They're going to have more depth down the middle. I think they're, a bubble playoff team. And I think Beniers can help them, get over that hump. So yeah, he's definitely a strong bet. So yeah, Beniers 1, power 2 for me, and McTavish 10.
Okay, well, we'll see who slots in the rest of your top five. Next up, in terms of these odds over at this, I just Googled like Calder odds, and I'm just looking at what's the first one that came up. Yeah, it is this like sports betting time. I've never been to the site before. Anyways, this isn't an advertisement for sports betting time. But next up, I'm seeing here Cole Perfetti and Kent Johnson, both at plus 1,200. Did we talk about Cole Perfetti last year? I feel like this is a name that we've been talking about a while.
We did, yeah. And unfortunately, he didn't really have much of an opportunity. We'll get to him, but let's go Kent Johnson next, because Mr. Golden Goal himself was the hero for the Canada's gold medal game. After McTavish saved that puck on the goal line, Kent Johnson put it away, gave them the gold. He also he represented Canada there at the U20s. He also represented them at the Olympics and at the World Championships. He was just all Canada all year, along with being at Michigan. At the very beginning of the season, we saw 9 games from him, and he really wasn't NHL ready then, but he went back to Michigan, 37 points in 32 games as a sophomore. That Michigan team was just ridiculous. But yeah, he's a magician with the puck, Kent Johnson, and he was, in his time, I mentioned he wasn't quite NHL ready, but he was pretty close to average, which hard to argue for such a young guy to, being average is pretty decent. One of the things I like the most about Johnson is he's probably better on the wing, where he can focus on that creativity. Our FHL scout Yarno had a couple of really good things to say about him. His elite vision and puck handling skills make him very dangerous offensively, and he's able to make dekes and find teammates with accurate passes. He's probably not going to be the first guy in the corner, so he really needs someone to get in there and dig out pucks. But Columbus has a few guys that are really good at that, and what Ken Johnson can do is score with his good shot, or make a seam pass or a saucer pass to an open player. Defensively, he's not bad. He gives good effort. He's just that's not really his strength. Not like McTavish, who's going to be a strong two-way player. And then you look at the centers that they have: Jenner, Roslovic, Silliger, Corrali. They're not the most inspiring group, but they can be pretty effective if they have strong wingers, which they do. The main issue for Johnson, I see, is that he's AHL eligible, and he might need some time there to translate his game to the pro level. But at plus 1,200, I think that's pretty good value for Kent Johnson, especially as a guy who I don't think has to do the heavy lifting to drive the offense. He can rely on his centers and some other people to do that. So I have him 6th on my list. I think that there are much worse bets than Kent Johnson.
Yeah, so I'm wondering now, what if the bet was just, is someone from the 2021 draft going to win the Calder? Because we've talked already about 4 of them, right? Power, Beniers, McTavish, and Kent Johnson. We're just skipping Luke Hughes, who I guess is the idea that Luke Hughes isn't going to be on the Devils this year.
He's going back to Michigan.
Man, I wonder if he feels left out, because also then we've got Edvinsson, Eklund, I guess both also are expected to play in the NHL. So I guess Luke Hughes, he'll have his time one day. But yeah, if you were to bet, let's say it was like 50-50 odds, you could either take anyone or someone who was drafted in 2021. What do you think is which one would you take? I guess it sounds like you would take the 2021 based on like your 1-2, but you could have the whole rest of the world. You could have the next, Michael Bunting potentially.
Well, just looking at my top 10, most of the top 5 are 2021 guys. And then the rest of the top 10, there's a lot of 2020 guys. So I think that I'd probably have to take the 2021 if you gave me that choice.
It'll be fun to look back and see how. Because I remember at the time, people were like a little bit like, oh, this draft, like we don't even know, it was a COVID season, a little weird. And now, I don't know, we're excited about these guys now. I guess we have to actually see how they do. But okay, as far as Kent Johnson goes, yeah, I hear great things. I feel like Columbus is a fun team this year. All of a sudden, like if they have this rookie Kent Johnson that people are stoked about, they got Gaudreau coming in. We've got Patrick Laine still. All of a sudden, like this is Cole Sillinger, who also drafted in this draft. Maybe he'll take a step up. We're I'm excited to see what Merzlikins can can do. I know that like people aren't expecting too much from the Blue Jackets this year, and maybe that defense of theirs, like behind Werenski, isn't looking that strong, and that might hold them back. But I think it's a fun team. I think I've been trying to decide which hat I should get. For today, I decided to wear my Sharks hat to join you as a fellow Sharks fan. I'm surprised you haven't picked a Shark yet to go in the top two, though. I guess that we're definitely going to get to a couple. But yeah, of all the teams, in terms of, I like to pick a hat. Last year, I picked the Panthers. Before the season, just a team that I'm excited to see what they're going to do with some new acquisitions. And now this year, I don't know. I'm kind of excited to see what Columbus will do, and we'll see if Kent Johnson. But again, like we said about McTavish, like I just don't know if he's fitting into the top six. Like he's a winger, right? And he's not bumping Gaudreau, so I don't know. Maybe he's bumping like a Gustav Nyquist, but he's a pretty solid NHL player at this point. So yeah, I don't think he'd be my bet. But yeah, like you said, we're getting at plus 1,200. So now we're getting a pretty good return if you want to take a swing. Who do you like better between Kent Johnson and Cole Perfetti, who has the same odds?
I like Ken Johnson. I have him ranked at 6th, and Perfetti is 8th. And part of that is just because, and we can talk about Perfetti now. He's a center. So I mentioned the heavy lifting. You have to do a little bit more work two-way to be a good center in the NHL. And Perfetti, so he was 10th overall from 2020. So now we're getting into some of those 2020 guys. But he really only went late because of his size. He's 5'11". He hasn't grown. He's still 5'11", but he's so smart. He already has 49 AHL games and 18 NHL games since his draft. So he's, had some pretty good pro experience. His Fenwick in the NHL was 60%, Elon, driving really good play. And that's really good to see. He's already, when you look at his Rampum chart from his NHL time, which is 231 minutes, so not nothing, but, not a huge sample size. He's already better than 85% of current NHLers in terms of expected goals against and Corsi against. That's pretty remarkable for such a young player. With all the drama in Winnipeg, I don't know, maybe there's a pretty good opportunity for Perfetti in the top 6. It seems like things are kind of shuffling, moving around there. Maybe they're looking for a new voice. He's definitely the kind of guy that I think will wear a letter for that team at some point. I don't know that he's ready right now for that, but he certainly can. Looking at hockey prospecting, it's really funny. His chart looks almost exactly like Joe Thornton's, who obviously was a star producer in the league, also was in the AHL, turned pro pretty early. I don't think anyone's going to confuse Cole Perfetti or call him Jumbo Cole Perfetti anytime soon, but I think he sees the ice with the same level of ease. He creates seams, creates passes, escapes the soft areas. There's some real similarities with the way that Thornton plays. Just the size is, of course, very different. But I love Cole Perfetti. I think that he's ready to stick full time in the NHL. He already showed at the end of last season that he's ready for this opportunity. Will he be the 3C or the 2C or move someone to the wing like PLD we've seen move to the wing? I think Perfetti might already be close to better pivot than PLD. So if he can stick in the top 6, I think he's a tremendous bet. I have him 8th on my list at plus 1,200. I think that's a very reasonable bet for Cole Perfetti.
Yeah, he also looks like someone that, like you said, like there's a really good chance. Like when you look at this Winnipeg depth chart, I'm realizing now, like once you get past their top 5 forwards, there's a big drop off, right? So like you've got Connor, Scheifele, Wheeler. Like who knows how many of these guys will still be on the team a couple months from now? Because like you said, there's been some drama. So Connor, Scheifele, Wheeler, Ehlers, and Dubois. Those are like the clear best 5 forwards on the team. They're going to get drafted in all fantasy leagues. Who's next? There's Cole Perfetti, who can round out that top 6, like you said. And then who are we even looking at on this team? Like, don't forget, this is a team that after Andrew Kopp got moved last year, we were talking on the podcast about like Evgeny Svechnikov playing with a Kyle Connor or whoever it was. Like he, not that he was able to do anything with it. And hopefully Cole Perfetti can do better than Svechnikov. But like, there's nobody. Like what? Mason Appleton, Adam Lowry, Morgan Barron. So I just can't imagine why, unless Cole Perfetti really just blows it hard, like he should be able to crack that top 6. And then, one injury, and all of a sudden we're looking at why not get him on the top power play, or if, Dubois gets traded because he's asked for it, or Scheifele gets traded. Yeah. So there's, kind of sad for Jets fans that this team is already so shallow and their star players want to leave. Looks like a rebuild is probably going to be coming, but great opportunity for Perfetti. So I don't know. I'd probably bet on him higher than Kent Johnson. Maybe again, this is just me going by the opportunity and more of the player, but just seems like there's such a good chance for him to play with good guys and potentially even get power play.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I think Kent Johnson's pure offensive upside is higher, but yeah, you're right. I think, as you said, it depends on a few things happening in Winnipeg, right? If the things break right, then certainly Perfetti has a huge opportunity. But, a lot of NHL coaches and Bonus has been a guy that has shown he likes to lean on like a few guys. And, whether Perfetti will be one of those, we don't know. But it could certainly break perfectly for him. And yeah, maybe they put him on the wing. I know Daily Faceoff has him like on the wing with PLD. And, who plays wing and who plays center sometimes is not always clear. Kind of depends on who takes the face off. But I think having a strong play driving winger with Connor and Dubois would be really nice. So, yeah, certainly he could fit in there. I'm not sure he makes it on the top power play, but there's a lot of opportunity there. I just worry a little bit about the heavy lifting that he might have to do as opposed to Kent Johnson, who could be more of a passenger and still be highly productive.
Yeah, but then I guess if we're trying to predict the Calder winner and not just like fantasy value, it's like, don't the Calder voters like care about someone who had to do some heavy lifting? Like maybe they won't give as much weight to like, like Michael Bunting. I guess he was third in votes. I don't know. To me, I just would have been like, clearly he was playing with Matthews and Marner, and maybe like not to say anything bad about him. Like he obviously like really relished the role and played really well. But I think a lot of players would have done maybe not as well, but like similarly well as Bunting did in that spot if you get to play all season with those two superstars. So we'll have to see if like, Kent Johnson's going to have to probably do something beyond just get points. But I guess it'll be fun to see. Last year they just had to give it to Sider, who didn't get as many points or wasn't as flashy as like a Trevor Zegras, but was clearly like playing big minutes in like all situations. It just was really helping his team. So yeah, I guess we'll have to see what the voters decide. But okay, I guess now that's it for the 1200s. And now we got 4 players at plus 1600. Then we've got a whole bunch at plus 20 or 2000. I was about to say 2000, like an idiot. So before we get into all those, let's just take a quick break. You're listening to Keeping Karlsson. All right, we are back with Victor Nuno from the Fantasy Hockey Life podcast to talk about some guys who have already now pretty high odds to win the Calder. And now I'm saying high in terms of high numbers, but like I still think I have decent chances. At least a couple of these plus 1600 guys I'm pretty interested in. Very curious to get your take on Rossi, Sanderson, Jack Quinn, and our Sharks boy, William Eklund. So where do you want to start with these 1600 guys?
Let's start with Marco Rossi, the 2020 ninth overall pick. He fell to 9th because he's 5'9", and he's still 5'9", but that hasn't really stopped him from being successful professionally. 53 points in 63 AHL games. He drove play exceptionally well, 56% Corsi 4 while playing for the Iowa Wild. And remember, he missed almost the entire 2020-21 season because he had serious cardiac complications from COVID. So that was rough for him. He looks still like an absolute star in the hockey prospecting model. He still has a 75% chance of being a star. So I think some people have kind of soured a little bit on Rossi because maybe he's taken a little bit longer and, he had a good, but not like maybe amazing AHL season. We'll talk about some of the guys that had ridiculously good AHL seasons. And so maybe that's part of it. But the one thing about Rossi and the Wild is they don't really need Rossi to step into this opportunity right now. So that's part of the reason he's a little bit lower for me, but he might force the issue in camp. I certainly could see him, and I've heard a lot of reputable people thinking he's going to be the 2 or even 1C in Minnesota by the end of the year. I think that would be really great. I'm not sure that he gets all the way there. Wanted to just highlight a couple of things that our FHL scout Jeremy said about Rossi. He says he's very NHL ready, no glaring holes in his game, strong two-way player, high IQ, not any one flashy game-breaking skill, but he's good positionally, and his play away from the puck is also elite. He excels at pushing the pace, and his shooting, passing, and puck handling are all should be above NHL average. He's also good defensively, so that should help as well, and really should be on the power play, ideally along someone like Kaprizov. So you just see that potential, and it's pretty tantalizing. The upside for Rossi is huge, especially with the right talent around him. He's someone that can make all those players better. But the reason I have him at 7th and not a little bit higher is because Minnesota is already a pretty deep team. And even though their centers aren't the strongest, I don't know that he pushes his way all the way to the top. I think he can, but I think if we're being realistic, he needs more NHL games to kind of earn that. And his very brief sample size that he's had so far, he didn't really take that opportunity. I only had a couple of games. He didn't really have a whole lot of time on ice. So he might spend some more time in the AHL and earn a call up, and then he'll have to really take that opportunity. So I think this is a big swing play at plus 1600. it's a reasonable bet. If it's if everything breaks right, Rossi could certainly be there, but I don't think he's the most likely to get a ton of opportunity.
Yeah, well, for what it's worth, there was an article just recently dropped by Michael Russo on The Athletic, and he talked to Coach Dean Eveson, and he was asking, like, really nicely for us fantasy players, like, specifically about what the lines will be. And Dean Eveson was pretty open about it, actually. So I could read you a quote here from this article. He said, so I'll just like go from the middle here. So yeah, that's where we'll start. So we've got Heartsea's line, which I guess is Ryan Hartman. He's Heartsea, and it's his line. It's not Kaprizov or Zook's line. It's Heartsea's line. So it's going to be the Kaprizov, Hartman, Zook line. That's the plan to start the season. And then he said, and then we've got X line, Joel Eriksson Ek, who he was talking about putting Tyson Jost and Marcus Foligno there. And then he said, now we've got to find another line, right? And we've got lots of players in competition for that. You got Rossi, Boldy, and Gaudreau, and Sam Steele, Connor Dewar, and Brandon Duhaime. And like when I'm reading that, I'm like kind of thinking, like, come on, you're not thinking of Sam Steele and Connor Dewar and Brandon Duhaime over Rossi, Boldy, and Gaudreau, right? Like last year, it was Fiala, Gaudreau, and Matt Boldy at the end of the season. And so it seems like if Marco Rossi could play center, they can move maybe Freddie Gaudreau to wing. I don't know. I feel like there's a decent chance. All I'm saying is obviously that line isn't as good when you don't have Kevin Fiala, but I know we're excited about Matt Boldy, and people have been excited for a while about both Rossi and Boldy. So if they could both play on a line together, I guess it depends. Maybe that line won't get as much ice time as they did last year when Fiala was there, and maybe now the Joel Eriksson Ek line plays more and is like the clear line two, and this is the line three at least to start. So obviously, anyways, I don't know how much this helps, but he's got Rossi as someone that he listed as one of the people who could be on that third line or second line, depending on how you want to look at it. So there's potentially going to be an opportunity there. Ryan Hartman, though, he can't be bumped, unfortunately, which is like not something I expected to say, right? Like last year when we talked about Marco Rossi, we were talking about maybe he could center the top line with Kaprizov because who else is going to do it? I guess it's Ryan Hartman. So by the way, if you're drafting, don't leave Ryan Hartman. I know a lot of people probably see his numbers, and I'll bet you Ryan Hartman's going to be one of those guys. If you have your draft room sorted by like last year's numbers, he's going to be like sitting at the top and no one will be taking him because no one's going to believe that he's as good as his numbers were last year. But don't wait too long, right? But anyways, we're not talking about Ryan Hartman here, but he's someone I would definitely draft because he's like right now slotted to play with Kaprizov, and we know how well that went for him last year. So anyways, Marco Rossi seems like an interesting guy. Sounds like you think he's got all the talent in the world. Seems like you definitely will have an opportunity to play with someone good like Matt Boldy at least. We'll see about the power play. And yeah, a fun bet here, but probably not my favorite choice of the plus 1600ers. So where do you want to go next?
Yeah, not my favorite either. And just as a look, talking about those centers again, I mean, X line with Foligno and Greenway, however much ice time they get, they are not an offensive line. Right. So you can say they're the second or third line, but that's not the line that's going to get the best offensive opportunities. It's probably going to be Rossi's line if he's out there, and then depends on who he's with. Probably Boldy and then someone else. Maybe it's Jost or Duhaime, or maybe they drop. I can't imagine they'll drop Zuccarello or Kaprizov.
I would have thought maybe it's just like Freddie Gaudreau moves to the wing,
Gaudreau probably. Yeah. Anyways, let's go next to, the next guy I have highest of this group is William Eklund. You mentioned him, and yeah, he is someone that I'm pretty excited about. It has nothing to do with being a Sharks fan. By the way, I don't really consider myself as much a fan anymore because I talk about all the guys, but I have grown up a Sharks fan, so I guess we'll still go with that. But William Eklund's stock is down. You have to remember that he played for literally the worst team in the SHL last year, so bad that they're now in the Allsvenskan. And Djurgårdens, the team he's played for, scored 136 goals as a team. The top five teams were all closer to 200 in the SHL. So there was a huge scoring difference. There wasn't a whole lot of opportunity for him there. He had a pretty pedestrian 14 points in 29 games, but, half point per game in, for literally the worst team could be, you could see that as sort of a positive. He will definitely be staying in North America. Last year, there were some rumors that maybe he'd stay in the AHL if he didn't make the Sharks, but this year he's for sure said he's not going back. He's going to stay in North America. I don't think the Sharks are going to be a good team this year, but I think they do have good top six talent. It's really the depth where they lack, and maybe goaltending. We could certainly talk about that, but we don't have to. The guys like Meyer, Hurdle, Couture, though, and then we'll talk about Bordelot a little bit later. LeBanc, who people forget about, but he was injured pretty much all last year. Barabanov, they have some decent players to play with, and I think the lack of truly elite guys beyond Meyer is actually really good for Eklund because he could certainly rise to be one of the top, ice time and opportunity getters in San Jose because I mean, I'm not sure that he's going to be better hurdle than Couture or anything, but the thing is that he's a different type of player than all of those guys. He's someone who's an extremely good playmaker. He doesn't, shoot as much, although they have this prospect tournament going on right now, Yolan, and I was watching, some people might have seen the highlights. He scored a ridiculous top down corner snipe from, I don't know, the top of the circle ish. So he's been working on his shot apparently. And that was always the concern, is that he doesn't shoot that much. Well, he seems like he's shooting more, and he's an excellent playmaker. So you could just imagine if he clicks with Meyer in training camp, oh boy, watch out, because he could be very good. He's one of those guys that he works really well with high level players. And you mentioned Bunting earlier. A lot of people will say like, oh, he plays with such good players, but it's actually really hard to play with good players sometimes. You can't just put anyone next to those two and expect them. Not saying that you said this, but some people think that it's easy. Not really. Like, you have to have the right skills. You have to be able to keep up with the pace. You have to know where guys are. Eklund has shown that he can play with anyone at any level. He's already, when he was with the Sharks, showed that. I think he has the opportunity to make a run at the Calder. I know that the Sharks love him. He's such a slick playmaker, good setup man. His unique skill set should allow him a ton of opportunity, and the best line mates in San Jose, the best San Jose can offer, which I know is not as good as some teams, but it's still pretty good. So I have him third of all the plus 1600 guys. He's the guy I would put my money on. I think he has the opportunity and the skill set, and people are down on him. If you can acquire him in a dynasty league, I think that might be worth it, because people are really kind of sour since he had such a bad season, quote unquote, bad season in the SHL.
Well, hey, maybe that was the case before that highlight reel goal that you were talking about yesterday. Maybe now people are back high on him again. But yeah, Eklund, to me, it's like another Perfetti situation, just in that there's so many open spots in that top six. So yeah, he could potentially play with Meyer and Hurdle. Who's he competing with? Barabanov? Luke Kunin? I don't know. So yeah, the opportunity is there. So if he could earn it, then this could potentially be a really good season for him. So yeah, I think I agree with you. I might even, if I was placing a bet right now, and again, I'm not promoting betting, but just the thought experiment here, I would definitely bet on Eklund at plus 1600 versus Owen Power at plus 400. Like, I feel like Power, I've given reasons why I'm a little bit skeptical. But even if you have Power a little bit ahead, not so much to be like 4 times the betting return. I'd rather just take the shot on Eklund, who there's definitely room for him on the top power play. Who's the Sharks' top power play for next year? Like, they have 3 guys. They've got Meyer, Hurdle, and Couture. Those are their 3, very good up to star players. And who's fourth? I guess LeBanc back in the day used to always be there. I don't know if that's still the case. I don't know why you're putting LeBanc there and not, William Eklund, or at least giving him a shot.
I think it's got to be William Eklund. I mean, I was making the argument last year, he was already the 4th or 5th best forward. And I think he's even better now. So yeah, I definitely think it has to be him. And as I mentioned, just a unique player. He's the guy that, well, he kind of does what Hurdle does on the power play. Hurdle is kind of that half wall playmaker, but I think Eklund is already just about as good at that. What they really need is someone in the bumper, and that's the problem. They've kind of put Meyer there, but he's like not really the best at that. I don't know. They might try someone like Nico Sturm or Evgeny Svechnikov, because they're just big dudes, and that spot doesn't necessarily have the best chance of scoring, and maybe they'll give Eklund like Hurdle spot on power play 2 or something like that. Not sure, but I mean, he really should be up there. He should play with the most talented forwards for sure.
Yeah, so the Sharks, kind of like the Blue Jackets, like a fun team. Maybe they won't be an amazing team in terms of their total season record, but I'm excited to see, because we also haven't talked about Bordeleau yet, who's also a fun prospect on the team. And so maybe they won't win a lot, but it'll be fun to see what Eklund could do. And you know me, I always love to watch Erik Karlsson and see what. By the way, whenever I turn on a Sharks game, Karlsson always looks great. Like, I don't know what it is. Like, I guess he's had some struggles, and obviously when he's missing time, that's not great. But I don't know. Whenever I actually see him on that, it seems like he's dominating, gets the puck, controls the whole play. Maybe I'm biased. I don't know. Okay, so we still got 2 more plus 1600 guys here: Jack Quinn and then Jake Sanderson.
Yeah, Jake Sanderson. He had a pretty awesome NCAA season for North Dakota, 26 points in 23 games. He had a hand injury that required surgery, so that limited him at the end of last year. But he should be good to go for Ottawa season opener. It seems pretty clear that he will be on the Sens opening day roster, a much improved roster, we should say too. And it also seems clear though that he's not taking Thomas Chabot's spot on the top power play. Thomas Chabot is pretty underrated. I think he probably should be going a little bit higher in a lot of these drafts. Eric Brandstrom, though, it also still exists. He got 45% of the power play last year. He's someone at one point I was really excited about, but he's really struggled in his two-way game. But there's no reason to have Eric Brandstrom on your team if he's not doing something offensively. So he might continue to get that offensive deployment. And so I think that Sanderson's going to have to pass Brandstrom for that power play opportunity in order to get enough points to really have an impact on the Calder. And I'm just not sure that he does that, which is why I have him down at 15. I think Sanderson's going to help the team quite a bit, which is going to be good for Sens fans. I'm just not sure that he's going to get enough opportunity to score the points. At plus 1600, it's not the worst bet ever. I just don't think that. I think there's way better defensemen with better opportunity, as we talked about on this list. Even he should make a pretty decent late round flyer in redraft leagues, though. I think his bash could be very good, and he, probably will pass Branson for ice time for sure. I just don't know that he'll pass him for power play opportunity. So 15th for me for Jake Sanderson. I think, in terms of general fantasy, redraft, and all that, and long-term potential, maybe he challenges Shabbat one day, but it's not going to be this year, I don't think.
Yeah, I think like as a longtime Sens fan, it's hard for me not to be excited about the team that's improving this year. And I think an underrated part of the improvement is going to be having Sanderson, just because their defense is so weak, and they really need to bring someone in that could eat up some minutes and like play a strong two-way game, like you're saying. But yeah, it seems like it's going to be unlikely for him to win the Calder, like save for an injury to Shabbat, which has happened before, happened last year, right? So maybe then something could happen, but I don't think that he's someone that I would be betting on, yeah, for the reasons you've said. And then we've got Jack Quinn over on the Sabres, our second Sabre. He's someone who, like, when he was drafted, everyone was saying, wow, the Sabres really whiffed on that pick. They should have taken Marco Rossi. Now they both have the same Calder odds. So full circle. But who do you think has the better chance to win between the two of them?
Definitely Rossi, and I'll tell you why. Jack Quinn, yeah, I still am Team Rossi. I have my shirt hanging in the background that you can't see, but I'm Team Rossi all the way. Jack Quinn had 61 points in 45 games, 61 in 45 AHL games. Monster production. He was the AHL Rookie of the Year. That probably makes you think he's got a good shot at the Calder, but I would say hold your horses a little bit. Jack Quinn's game is very incomplete. He had a 47% Fenwick Corsi. They're both the same, 47%. And that's really hard to do when you're scoring 61 points in 45 games. You just drive and play terribly. I don't know how he did that. He basically just cheated for offense all the time. I did watch a fair number of Rochester Americans games because I was just really interested. And basically my takeaway from that was that Jack Quinn isn't as good as JJ Peterka, which we will talk about later. Part of it was a high shooting percentage. Part of it was that he just completely ignores defense. He gives little or incomplete effort. I just don't think that's going to fly in the NHL. I'm not sure Jack Quinn is going to earn the ice time. If he does, he's going to score a lot of points because that's what he does. He is very good. I'm not saying he's not good at scoring points, because he obviously is. He's got a good shot. He's got good offensive instincts. He can do more than just shoot, but it's pretty much all in the offensive zone. His off puck play has to be at least NHL average for him to get these opportunities. And I just don't think he's even close, frankly, to being NHL average defensively and off puck. So, at plus 1600, I don't think you're throwing your money away or anything, but I think it's pretty close. He's not even in my top 10. I have Jack Quinn at 17th. I would not touch him, frankly.
But is he going to make the team, do you think?
Again, I think when the coach looks at his two-way effort, I just think he's going to he's going to be very unhappy about that. And I think that that's not going to fly. So if you can completely isolate him, put him in just offensive opportunities, put him with a really good defensive two-way center. Do they have any of those? I don't know. Like, it's going to be hard. You really have to isolate him and protect him from, the rigors of playing in the NHL against strong offensive, opposition. I don't think that they can do that. I think he's going to be a liability out there. So unless you're just playing him like 10 to 12 minutes a night on the power play and in offensive situations, he's going to be a liability for you out there. So I don't think he's going to play that much unless he can really come around, which I just really did not see, frankly.
Yeah, and also the Sabres are maybe a little bit underrated, and they've got some depth now. Like, they've got that top line, Skinner, Thompson, Tuck, that looked good last year. And then, they got like I don't know, Victor Olofsson, Casey Middlestad and like a Peyton Krebs or a Dylan Cousins. Like there are some guys that could easily block Jack Quinn from getting into the top six. So yeah, all right, you've heard it here. Don't bet on Quinn. That's it. So then, yeah, there's some guys here at plus 2000 that become very interesting. Actually, all four of them are guys that I'm very curious to get your takes on. We've got two picks from this most recent draft in Slavkovsky and Shane Wright. Then we've also got Bordeleau, who we brought up on the Sharks. And then a dark horse here, Logan Thompson for Vegas, who very likely could be their starting goalie all season because the other options there, aren't that great. We're looking at, they just signed Aiden Hill from your former Sharks. And I guess they've got an injured guy in Brossois who even knows if he'll come back. And when he does come back, he's not even that good. So these are some very interesting picks. And I guess before we get to them, Victor is telling me that he's hungry and needs to have a snack because he's got a hockey game coming up. You know how it is when you got a big game. You got to have your carbs, got to get loaded up. So why don't we just take this opportunity to take a break? We call this part one. We've already been talking for an hour. So thanks everyone for listening. And if you want to hear more about this Calder talk, those four guys I just brought up, and then also some guys that Victor may think that we haven't even discussed yet that the odds makers must have like really far down that may turn into good bets. So we're going to get into a lot more players in part two of this episode. So yeah, just like make sure you're subscribed with Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever. If you are, then you already have part two sitting there waiting for you. So we'll talk to you soon. And I won't even read any credits or anything. I'm not even going to play any outro music. I'm just going to say, see ya in part two. Thanks for listening. Bye. And then for the live show people, they could see Victor just munching on something. What kind of good snacks do they have over in California?
Well, it's just a sandwich. I don't know if you all do this, but I play hockey. When I play, I have to eat like at least 4 hours or more before I play, or I just feel sick. So
yeah, when I do any exercise, I don't like, aside from walking or biking, I could eat and do those. But yeah, anytime I'm gonna like go to the gym, I like to give myself some time, or at least back when I used to go to the gym. It's been kind of a while since I've done that.
Hey, how long for Dina?
Oh, she's due in less than a month. So it could be like any day now. Yeah. It's pretty wild.
I think I'm going to be in Europe when that happens. I'm going to Europe in the 9th of October. So
for vacation?
Well, it's partly for a conference. It's actually in Rome, but
we're still, by the way, just so you know, look, we're still on the live stream.
I know.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. You can hear a little bit about this. Victor, do the Blake Pomo beer. Yeah. Y'all should. It's funny. I actually have some recording of me playing, and you know how like sometimes when I play, you feel like you're going like super fast, and you made this cool move, and then you watch on the video, you're like, I am so slow and terrible. And then you think about how fast those NHL players are.
Yeah, it must be weird to be a scout and then watch tape on yourself after watching tape of all of these exciting prospects.
Mm-hmm.
But how many of them are going to conferences as an MD?
Yeah, so my mom has a place in France.
Ooh.
So we're gonna go stay with them for like 2 weeks and then pop over to Rome for that.
That sounds amazing. Yeah, have a great time. Like you're bringing the whole family, I assume?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 2 little ones. They're 4 and 7. So your whole world's about to change, Elon. It's so different traveling with kids and all that.
Yeah, I'm just planning on never leaving the house. I'll just do podcasts while they're playing on the ground behind me. That'll be that.
Yeah, you know how it goes. It's gonna be tricky. But you usually do stuff. You're kind of a night owl, right? So you do stuff at night.
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, we'll see. I don't know. I feel like the whole like schedule probably changes after having a kid. I'll just sort of like sleep when I get the opportunity. But yeah, I think like I just need to get through. I've got my couple auction draft on October 2nd, which is like a lot before the due date. So I feel like if I could just do a good draft, which I haven't really prepped for yet, then yeah, maybe I'll be able to, be up at 3 a.m. and get those like sweet first dibs on the Yahoo transition time. For you, it's actually not that bad. You get it at midnight before you go to bed. So yeah, if I'm up at 3,
but then the clock always starts for us at like 6 a.m.
Oh, you mean for like when news comes out?
No, I mean, well, I know the couple doesn't sleep, but like a lot of the draft timers and stuff, like they sleep on East
for the
Coast
actual
time.
draft.
Yeah. So then it's like, oh yeah, everybody's cool, and like I'm up. It's like 9-10 o'clock. Everybody's asleep, and then it's like 6 a.m. People are like pinging me to draft, and it's like, dude, come on, it's early.
Well, Gotta get those guys queued up. Though I guess a lot of people are getting taken. Yeah, I guess it's hard to like. It's easy for me to say like just like queue some people up and turn on auto draft, but I know that's like when you're drafting, sometimes you really want to get a sense of like what those last couple picks were before yours. So I hear that.
I'm actually up right now. If you want to help me.
Sure. So this is your second pick,
Mm-hmm.
and you were 8th overall. Oh, so you gotta. Okay, so who are we deciding between?
Well, the guys who just went, Panera and Matty Kachuk. Oh, Shesty went. I would have taken Yossi, but he went. Kyle Connor,
Okay.
Barkov, Stamkos, Huberdeau, Pasternak. So all those guys are gone. I'm looking at Vasi, but I'm not going to do that probably. And then Timo Meyer.
I hear. Actually, let me just open up your division here. It'll be easier for me to. Then you could also focus on eating, while I could do this, and we could get the show back on the road. So one second. Let me log in here.
Done.
Going to tier 4 small. We're gonna play a game with the chat here. Who should Victor take? Matty is saying to get Hedman, which is obviously not a bad choice.
Wait, Matty's not in my division, is he? He's trying to.
No, Matt won last year. He's up in tier 2 now.
Oh, congrats, Matty.
All right, let's see here. So I feel like you already have Kucherov. That would be kind of fun to have Kucherov and Hedman. Just go to it. You could get your Timo Meyer, your Sharks fan. He's projected to, like with our format, there's a lot of shots. Who else do we have here? Gaudreau.
+1 for Hedman. Yeah.
The thing with Meyer is he's left wing and right wing, which is pretty helpful. But I don't know. To me, it's a little high. Jake Gensel. I always like Jake Gensel. Honestly, I feel like he's a really good option. I think for me it would be. I don't know.
Hard to not want. I mean, right wing and D. Those are like the hardest to fill, right? I mean.
Yeah, is Gensel not going to get right wing? I feel like Yahoo always ends up giving it out, but maybe. I'm not sure. I think last year he was left wing and right wing.
He should get both, yeah.
But yeah, if you want right wing, then maybe you go Timo Meyer.
Well,
Tarasenko is also good, but maybe it's a little too high. Well, it's high to me. It still feels like I'm like a little conservative when I play. Like I don't know if I just want like Timo Meyer. Like a couple seasons ago, you'd be laughed out of the room about talking about him here, and now all of a sudden we're like second round. So I don't know. To me, I'd like to see a couple seasons of being, especially when you have all these elite options available. So maybe just
go Meyer.
Yeah, maybe you just go Hedman. Grab the strong D. Hedman or Gensel, I think would be my choices, and maybe like Tarasenko, dark horse. Just get the right wing.
You know, one thing I've been thinking about recently is the team, right? Like just looking at. Well, obviously you'll always think about that, but I'm thinking about it more. Like just looking at Hedman, Letang, Ekblad, John Karlsson, they're not too far off, right? But then you look at like the team and like there's no question like how good Tampa's going to be. There may be some questions about Pittsburgh and Washington, Florida. I don't think there's many questions.
I'm not too worried about Pittsburgh for what it's worth. Like at least for now. Like I don't know, Crosby and Malkin still look good, right? As long as they're still putting up point per game year in year out, like I'm not gonna get too worried. But Washington I could see because Backstrom and Wilson are both injured, so it's like one guy. Basically, if there was no Ovi, this team would look like a team that can't do anything. So
all right, you're right. I'm gonna take Edmund. I think thanks everyone for their help.
Then you gotta get yourself a lightning hat if you've got Kucherov and Hedman to start off.
Now they're both gonna go on LTR the rest of the season.
Oh no. All right. So
just one more second, then I'm ready. Okay, just 1 sec.
All right. Sounds good. Hopefully that was fun for the live show people. Yeah, it's a tough spot here. A lot of good players, obviously. Like I also really like Jack Eichel. Like I feel like he's gonna fall. Like maybe if he's still somehow available to Victor for his third pick, I'd be pretty stoked to get like I think there's no reason why Eichel. I mean, assuming Mark Stone is healthy, and I know there's all this like stuff he needs to have someone good to play with, but Eichel could be a superstar. Like he could definitely be it. He's been drafted in the first rounds before, and he's had time to heal. So I wonder if he's someone who will end up being like the big like value guy of drafts. I mean, there's also always the chance like Sidney Crosby is just like he was really good last year as well. He just missed some time. Like if I sort everyone left available to Victor in terms of fantasy points per game, now I'm seeing a bunch of goalies. So let me just do only skaters. Let me do in terms of fantasy points per game from last year: Forsberg, Meyer, Gaudreau, Landeskog, Miller, Gensel. Okay, Crosby's actually pretty far down. Gensel, Kadri, and then Crosby. Okay, well he picked Hedman, so no worries. Oh, you haven't picked. Go pick Hedman. Oh, he just did it. All right, there we go.
All right,
let's start the show.
You want me to? Oh, we're gonna start. Or we're gonna start from scratch, right? So then you'll set me up for the 2000
Yeah, yeah.
guys.
Okay. Yes, welcome everybody to another episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast. I was asked before that the next time I do a part 2 to use an NPR voice for the intro to signify that it's not a brand new episode, but just the second half. And today we are going to be continuing our conversation with Victor Nuno from the Fantasy Hockey Life podcast about rookies and Calder candidates for the 2022-2023 season. We had a lot of fun talking about all the players who you couldn't get at less than 20-1 odds, but now we're looking at some real value guys. So let me transition back to my normal voice and get excited to talk to Victor about, like I said at the end of part 1, some really high pedigree players, including a first overall pick, a guy who everyone thought was going to be a first overall pick, a goalie that has potentially the best opportunity of any of the goalies that are going to be available to win the Calder, and potentially someone who could also end up being a really huge value in fantasy, and then another Shirk. So where do you want to start with these plus 2,000 guys?
Let's start with Logan Thompson. Logan Thompson.
Oh, do you want to take that over again? Because I could really hear that microphone moving.
Sorry. Let's start with Logan Thompson. I think Logan Thompson did just about all he could to get Vegas into the postseason. Sadly for the Golden Knights, it just didn't quite work out, but he was great. I mean, the team didn't really offer him the best protection, and he well outperformed his Delta Fenwick or his expected Fenwick save percentage, both at even strength and tremendously on the penalty kill. So he was great. Of course, they went out and got Adin Hill. All of this is because Robin Lehner is going to miss the whole season. I really liked Thompson a lot more before they acquired Adin Hill. And, Brossoit is injured, so he might come back at some point, and they might have a few guys there that could eat up some ice time. So that's a little bit disappointing. But I really like Thompson. I think he has the best opportunity for all these guys. And apparently Hill and Thompson went to the same middle school in Calgary. That's kind of fun. So maybe that familiarity will bring out the best in them. I know they both kind of talked about that, about how that friendly competition is good. But, Brossoit has been a pretty decent guy, just not, hasn't had the volume. I really wish they hadn't made the trade for Hill. I think Thompson would probably be top 5 on my list if that were the case. Even so, I think that Thompson can rise to the cream of this not very good crop. I think that Hill has shown himself to be not very good. Brossoit is kind of, decent in a backup role, but Thompson has shown that he can kind of take the ball and run with it and get some consecutive starts in a row and be effective. And none of these other guys have really shown that. So I think at plus 2,000, that's a pretty good bet for Logan Thompson. I have him 9th on my list. So just inside the top 10, he's easily the top goalie on my list. And I think that there's no question he has the best opportunity of any of them. So, and like you mentioned, in redraft leagues, yeah, hard to not want the goalie on one of the better teams in the NHL. Certainly one of the best in the Pacific Division, right, Alan?
Yeah, and don't forget that Brossoit's injured to start the year, so we're gonna get Thompson at least to start, and then Adin Hill, he only played 25 games. He really struggled with injury last year, so there's definitely no guarantee that he's going to be able to hold up. So there's a decent chance that by the time Brossoit comes back, maybe just Adin Hill won't be very good. I think there's many sort of outs for Logan Thompson to end up staying with the team. Maybe Brossoit ends up having a setback in his prognosis and doesn't come back as quickly as people expect. So there's a lot of ways that Thompson can stay. And I think while Brossoit's out to start the year, and while it's Hill and Thompson, I don't know. It doesn't seem like that big of a challenge. I don't want to discount Adin Hill here, but yeah, Thompson is definitely the more exciting option. And yeah, if you could get him pretty late in your drafts, you might end up getting a bit of a steal. And yeah, if you want to take a chance on the Calder, goalies don't tend to win the Calder very often. Victor, do you remember the last goalie to win?
Oh, I should have looked that up. I should have looked that up, but I don't remember. You have it in front of you?
Yeah, I got it. So Steve Mason won it back in 2009. Before that, Andrew Raycroft won it in 2004. It's pretty rare.
Brian's favorite goalie, Steve Mason.
Yeah, he really thought that Philly should be playing him more back in the early days of Keeping Karlsson. Thanks for remembering our golden years. But okay, so that's Thompson. Interesting pick. Want to talk about these 2 guys who just got drafted recently?
Yeah. So Yuri Slafkovsky, Shane Wright. We'll start with Slafkovsky. I'm really not sure what to expect from Slafkovsky. He was a goal a game at the Olympics, had a fantastic tournament. But again, that was just 7 games. I don't think it'll be that. I also don't think it'll be 5 goals in 31 games that he had in Liga. Probably somewhere in between. That's again if he even sticks in the NHL the whole time, which I'm not sure he will. There's a lot being said about his size. I mean, he is a large man already, 6'4", 225 pounds. It takes a lot sometimes for those big guys to really become consistent. It might take him a little bit of time to really start producing. So I'm just not convinced that that's going to happen. I know Montreal was much better under St. Louis and everyone's really excited about that, but they're still not a great team. There's a lot of holes in their lineup, and Slafkovsky certainly is going to solve all their problems. I don't think they're expecting to be a super good team. So why would they, expose him to, some serious struggles when he's from Europe, so he could literally play in any league, right? He could go to the NHL, he could go to the AHL, they could get loaned back to Liga. He could even go to the CHL if they felt that was right for him. I don't think they'll do that, but it's kind of a mystery what's going to happen with him. It's interesting too, because the NHLE models don't really like Slafkovsky that much. He doesn't have the best comps. We were just talking about Ryan Hartman. He's actually one of the comps for him. Nick Foligno, Steve Downey. He actually looks a fair amount like Mikko Rantanen in this model, but I think that would be the super high-end outcome if everything went perfectly for Slafkovsky. So I just really don't think that's going to happen. Also, the last 18-year-old to win the Calder, Nathan McKinnon. So I feel pretty strongly that it's not going to be Slafkovsky because there's just so far that he has to go, and big guys take longer. I would not make this bet at plus 2,000. He's not even in my top 10, not even my top 20. I have Slafkovsky at 22, so I wouldn't waste the money betting on him. I think he has a real uphill battle, even to stay in the NHL the whole year, frankly.
Yeah, I think he's the kind of guy that if you see in training camp that he's, going to start the season playing with Suzuki and Caulfield, he'll be a fun guy to take in fantasy. But even still, maybe don't reach for him in your drafts because it might just be for a 9-game, tryout before they have to burn a year, and then they send him to whatever league, like Victor was saying. So, maybe don't get fooled. But I mean, there's always the chance that the Habs just decide to, even if they're going to be a bad team, they want to have like maybe a fun team and have some. I mean, they don't have trouble selling tickets though, so really there doesn't seem to be a reason why they should use this year up. So yeah, I'd be pretty surprised if they keep him, but who knows what they'll do. There is potentially an opportunity there because we did, like when I talked to Arpon Basso, he was saying how like they were going to be excited to try out him with Suzuki and Caulfield and see how he'll do. So while he's there, I'd be interested, right? Like for a stream or like to just add him early on in a league. But yeah, it seems like for the Calder, it's pretty unlikely because we're getting to guys who potentially might not even be in the NHL. I'd like to at least have someone who's going to have a good shot if I'm putting down money or like. But yeah, for fantasy with the late pick, I like having a lot of players who I'm going to have for a short term and stream them out depending on the schedule and whatever. So he could be a really fun guy if he makes the team out of camp. Because if he makes the team, why not just put him in a great situation to produce? Why would they let him make the team and then put him on the fourth line? That seems like the biggest waste. But okay, so that's him. And then I guess Shane Wright. I guess I heard you talk about him on the Fantasy Hockey Life podcast, but just for the listeners here, like, do you think it was like a travesty that he fell to fourth, or do you think it was a deserving fall after a season where when I look at the numbers, I'm like, okay, those look like pretty good numbers to me in the OHL, but I guess he didn't score as many goals as people wanted him to.
He had a really good OHL season. He didn't have the dominant OHL season of like a Crosby and McDavid that people wanted him to have, but yeah, I think some of the Shane Wright hate has gone a little far, but I don't think it was a major travesty. I think Slafkovsky has the potential to be a Mikko Rantanen unicorn type player that's huge, physical, with soft hands that can get in there in front of the net and bang goals home, but also snipe from the dots. He has that potential. Shane Wright does not have that potential, but Shane Wright should be a very good, very effective player. I was a little interested too that, Cooley was taken at third, but I think Arizona just had their heart set on him because they probably didn't think they could get Wright. And then they interviewed and spent a lot of time with Cooley. And so they took him. I think the real wild card was New Jersey, who just seemed like they wanted a defenseman. So they took Nemec. But yeah, I think Seattle was super stoked to get Shane Wright. And they have now 2 awesome centers and Beniers and Wright. Pretty hard to argue with that. I think that, Wright was the consensus number 1 pick in 2022 for years. And then, yeah, he slid all the way down to fourth. The thing about Wright is his game is already so mature. He's already a pretty strong 2-way player, not actually one of the strongest in the draft, but definitely like a top 5 2-way player. And I think with Beniers, he's probably the second best center there long term, but he has the opportunity to kind of trade back and forth with Beniers. Our FHL scout Jeremy actually lives in the area and spent a lot of time scouting, right, which is kind of interesting. He said he's the most NHL ready forward in this draft, mature two-way, doesn't have any holes in his game. But the thing that's interesting is that his tools are all above average, but none of them are really elite. They make them kind of slam dunks. So that's something that's kind of interesting. But his shot is really good, borderline elite. He has a quick release and knows how to slow the play down and look for passes when he needs to. He's also really good at protecting the puck. The problem with Wright is that it's NHL or CHL. And, Seattle is looking like they're going to be a bit better. We talked about that earlier and with Beniers. And so if Wright isn't ready to make a significant impact in the top 6, they might just send him back to junior, to really dominate, put up 2 points per game, and then maybe come back. So he might not play the whole season. He still has tremendous offensive upside. I'm just not sure it's going to happen this year. I seriously doubt that he has enough to work with there in terms of games played, and the young ones just tend not to win, So at plus 2,000, I think that there are probably better options we'll talk about here. So I have Wright just outside my top 10 at 14. I like him. I just think that he probably needs another year to really come in and make a significant impact. So yeah, I'm not sure that I would even be reaching for him in redraft, because I think that there's a better option even on his team, right, with Beniers. So I don't think that that's going to be very likely for Shane Wright.
All right, makes sense. So let's say you had the opportunity to bet right now on the 2024 Calder winner. Who would you take between Wright and Slavkovsky? Or do you have someone else in mind already that you think has a better chance?
2024 Calder? Well, I guess that wouldn't be Connor Bedard, right? Because he'll probably be in the league next year. But he would be the pick if that were
so
the
right.
case.
So Bedard. Oh yeah. Well, no, that's next year, right? So I guess you're saying Bedard will get drafted and then come right to the NHL and then be better than all these guys.
Connor Bedard is going to be McDavid level.
All right. Well then,
amazing.
McDavid didn't win the Calder. He was injured for a bit, I know. And Panarin got it. But yeah, no, I hear you. So okay, poor Wright and Slavkovsky. They just got drafted in the wrong year, and now they're not going to have a chance to win the Calder. Too bad. Okay, so and then we have Bordelot over on the Sharks. So he also came up at the end of last season, similar to Beniers, and he had 5 points in 8 games. Looks like he got some decent power play time. Obviously, it was like garbage time for the Sharks. These games didn't matter. Now but everything I just said about Eklund and how basically it just seems like there's like 3 good Sharks forwards and then a lot of openings outside of that. But Bordelot is a center, and the Sharks are good at center, right? Like they've got Couture and Hurdle. So do you think this is a situation where Bordelot is going to be like a middle sixer, or do you think he like moves to the wing, or what do you think?
He's a center. Bordelot should be a center. He's actually a face-off whiz. If you look at all of his face-offs, he took a ton for the Americans at the World Juniors. He is someone who's good on both dots, which isn't always the case for most people. He turns a stick around. He's tremendous on the face-off circle. So even if he like ends up technically playing the wing, he's going to take a lot of face-offs. So he's going to be someone who probably plays down the middle, and maybe it's not right away, but yeah, he was the second round pick for the Sharks in 2020. He just finished his second season at Michigan that was at least a point per game. So that was pretty tremendous. I definitely like Eklund better, as you mentioned, because I think he's more of a winger and he can slide next to one of those strong centers. I mean, Hurdle, Couture are good. Benino's a great third line center. They also have Nico Sturm, which is like whatever. But Bordelot, yeah, maybe he plays with Couture or Hurdle and slides to the wing, but takes a lot of faceoffs. That's certainly very possible. He was already amazing in the AHL. I mean, he played his first couple professional games and he was like the best player on the ice. It was kind of comical. He was kind of toying with some of the opposition. And then, when he played for the Sharks, he did not look out of place at all. He was creating plays. He was fast. He was thinking the pace of the game ahead of most other people. So I really like Bordelot. If I had to pick a Shark, I would definitely pick Eklund. Just because I also think, yeah, as you mentioned, being a center, he has a lot more responsibilities and might be relied on a little bit more heavily in defensive responsibilities, which the Sharks could really use because they don't have too many great defensive forwards. But at plus 2,000, I think there's pretty decent opportunity there for Bordelot. And I know the Sharks absolutely love him. There have been some talks of, trade. Niels Lundqvist, who's, Rangers defenseman that's kind of been on the trade block. People are saying, oh, you should trade Bordeleau for him. They're like, absolutely not. They will not part with him for just about anything. So there was also discussions of him going to Edmonton for Puljujarvi. Definitely did not want to do that. So they really like Thomas Bordeleau. I have him at 16th. I think there's a decent chance he gets significant NHL time, but he might also get bumped down to the AHL so he can build up his confidence and kind of dominate down there. So definitely think he's one of the, decent bets at plus 2,000, but probably similar to that Shane Wright range where there's just question marks.
Okay, yeah, I hear you. And by the way, Niels Lundqvist is no longer a Ranger. He's now been traded to Dallas. So that's done for a conditional.
When did that happen?
Just like, I don't know, a few minutes ago. We're recording this Monday evening. Looks like Rangers have acquired a conditional first in the 2023 draft and a conditional fourth. So I haven't read all the conditions yet, but it's pretty good return for a guy who wasn't going to even make the Rangers roster, probably.
Damn, that's really good for Dallas.
Oh, good for Dallas, you think?
Niels Lundqvist is a really good player. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Wait, maybe I'm mixing up my guys here. There was one on the Rangers beat writer episode. There was one defenseman who was saying it was good, and then one who was saying really struggled last year.
Well, he did struggle a little bit, but his upside is still pretty tremendous. Zach Jones was the one that I think more people are excited about, and I think the Rangers were probably smart to keep him because Zach Jones is a little bit closer to being NHL ready. Lundqvist just kind of struggled a little bit with his confidence, and that's not terribly difficult to understand when he kind of played in different leagues and came over to North America recently. So, but there's still tremendous upside with Lundqvist. I wouldn't be surprised if he's top pairing or at least second pairing in the next few years in Dallas for a long time. So yeah, I mean, probably good for both sides, right? But I really like the player.
Okay, cool. Well, good to know. Congrats, Dallas fans. Also, I guess since we're talking about news really quickly, the news came out. Did you hear that Sean Couturier is potentially going to be out for the whole season? So
that's really nice though that it happened the day the Cupful draft started. So at least most people probably weren't to Sean Couturier range. So at least now they know.
Yeah. Ooh, I wonder if we should proactively go and remove Couturier. No, I guess we don't have to micromanage that much. So yeah, people hopefully are smart enough to know now. He'll have a big red flag beside him now if you go to draft him. So hopefully people will know not to draft him. But yeah, I guess move Kevin Hayes up your draft list a little bit. Someone's got to play center for this team and do something, right? So
yep.
Who else? Who even is? Who else do they have at center over on Philly?
Well, I guess Konechny can play center. I mean, Morgan Frost is someone who should take the leap, but he just hasn't.
Yeah.
They have. Yeah. I mean, Frost probably will get some opportunity. That's pretty much a Patrick Brown. Yeah, they don't really have a lot of options there.
Okay. So, anyways, what are we talking about? Calder here. So it's not going to be Niels Lundqvist. And you think it's probably not going to be Bordeleau, Slavkovsky, or Shane Wright. Maybe dark horse Logan Thompson. Now we're getting to some real dark horses here. Plus 2,500. Another Ranger. Or at one point we were talking about him as basically a former Ranger, just like Niels Lundqvist and Vitaly Kravtsov. But he's back. So he spent a little bit of time back in Europe. Now the Rangers are finally going to give him a chance here. What do you think? How did Kravtsov look over these last couple of seasons when he wasn't able to make the Rangers, and do you think he'll be able to make an impact now?
I'm very skeptical. For people who don't know, Kravtsov was the first round pick in 2018. He's at I think tumultuous is a nice way of putting it, relationship with the Rangers. He's failed to stick with the team on several occasions. They feel like they've given him ample opportunity. He feels like they haven't. But he did play 20 games back in 2020-21. That was one of the weird COVID years, had 4 points. But he's basically been in the KHL on loan since then, basically since 2020, actually, when he was in the AHL. And yeah, he's wasn't amazing last year in the KHL or anything. I mean, 13 points in 19 games was good. He had 10 and 15 playoff games, so pretty strong. But the thing is, that Rangers top 9 is pretty stacked, and he's someone who, I mean, he's basically been in the doghouse for years. The difference now is that he is on a one-way contract, so they would have to waive him if they didn't like his play and risk losing him for nothing. Because if they try to do that, I'm sure someone would claim him. And so, yeah, it's going to be, I know some people are kind of high on him. I just really don't think it's going to happen. I can't see him getting a top 6 opportunity with all the strong forward that they have there. I mean, maybe he gets an opportunity next to Trocheck. I guess that's possible. He is a big physical player, but I just really would not bet on him. I think that he's a little bit older, which I guess that helps him, but I just think that the opportunity isn't really there. And he has really failed to impress in North America. He has done okay in the AHL. His only full AHL season was back in 1920. He had 15 points in 39 games, which is like, okay, but it's not something that you get super excited about as a prospect. So I have Kravtsov at 23. I wouldn't waste my money on plus 2,500.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, yeah, seems like a long shot considering he has, struggled to make the team. But when you do say though that they have a lot of strong forwards, like don't forget, like last year in their playoff run, it was Andrew Kopp and Frank Vetrano in the top 6, and they're both gone. And I guess the hope, if you're a Rangers fan, is that Lafreniere and Kakko are finally jumping into the top 6, like they hoped they would be by now as players drafted first and second overall. But if one of them continues to not impress in the regular season, then I guess, that could open up a spot for Kravtsov. I guess since you're the prospect expert of those 3, sounds like not Kravtsov. Who would you rather have? Is like Lafreniere still someone that we should be super high on? Like, what's your current take on these Rangers prospects? If you could still call them prospects.
Yeah, I guess they're borderline. I don't really want any of them, frankly. I think that Kakko, I mean, if he ends up being a 50, 55 point player, with decent peripherals, you'd be happy. I think Lafreniere probably, okay, I would take Lafreniere of those 3. I think that he has the most upside still, but I still think he's a 65 to 70 point upside type player. So I don't think point per game is in the cards. I mean, of course, anything can happen with the right deployment and shooting percentage, but I think people were thinking he's going to be like point per game plus, and I never really saw that. So I think you need to adjust your expectations on Lafreniere. If you think his upside is, point per game, maybe dial that back 10 to 15 points, and then you won't be disappointed when he gets close to that.
Right. So if you're in a dynasty league and you have Lafreniere, maybe now is like your last chance to trade him for like a huge return, because people might still be thinking, hey, he's still pretty young. But if you agree with Victor that it's just not going to happen, then maybe now's your last chance to trade him as someone that's a future point per game player. So if you want to take that risk, it's a risky way.
Trade him and then send me your hate mail when it doesn't work out.
Well, but also let us know who you trade. Don't trade him for nothing. I'm talking about trade him for like a big haul, because you're treating him like a big star. Okay, so now we're getting to plus 3,000, and we got a couple guys who I feel like, I don't know. And actually, let me even bring up a couple 4,000 guys here, like some guys who could potentially have good deployment, right? Nick Robertson on the Leafs. So we just saw what Bunting did, and the Leafs still kind of you think of their depth charts, and they obviously are like this like super top heavy team. But when you look at like their stars, they have Tavares, they have Matthews, and they have Marner, and then they have Nylander. So that's 4. There's still 2 top 6 spots, right? And it seems like Bunting is probably going to be with Matthews and Marner after how things went last year. And then who's on the second line with Tavares and Nylander? I guess Kerfoot is the front runner, but like, come on, it's kind of boring. And he's a solid like third liner. So why not give a shot to Nick Robertson, who I know some people are pretty into. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on him. And also Alex Holtz, I see here at 3,000. Like, I remember last year, I feel like we talked about Holtz last year, and you were, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, higher on him than Dawson Mercer. And Mercer ends up making the team and, had a pretty impressive rookie season. But Holtz was the one who was the higher pedigree prospect, right? So if Mercer was able to come in last year and do something, then maybe Holtz could come in this year and do something similar. So I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on both of these guys, Robertson and Holtz.
Yeah, well, we can start with Holtz. If you remember, though, I did say Dawson Mercer is the more complete player, and I could see him getting more of a two-way opportunity. And Holtz, I mean, Holtz is a shot. That's what he is. He kind of reminds me, well, I've made this comparison before. He reminds me a lot of Mike Hoffman, who has an excellent shot, good offensively, but when the puck isn't around, he's not doing much. And that's the big concern with Alexander Holtz. Does he do enough away from the puck? And I'm sure that's what New Jersey saw. They saw this guy who doesn't do much when the puck isn't near him or in an offensive opportunity. And Dawson Mercer is just an awesome two-way player who makes everybody around him better. And so, of course, they gave him that opportunity. Well, I mean, maybe it seems obvious now, but he ran with it. It did great, obviously. So hard to argue with the result. But yeah, Alexander Holtz, 51 points in 52 games. Amazing AHL production last year. He was tremendous. He does, as I mentioned, there's some concerns. And our FHL scout, Matt, who's a Jersey fan, wrote a couple interesting things about him. He struggles to drive play, as you can see in his subpar Corsi and Fenwick. He also makes really questionable decisions sometimes when carrying the puck, skating directly into defenders without properly protecting the puck, so creating turnovers for himself. His shot is what his calling card is, though. He has a quick, accurate release, and he can score from anywhere on the ice. So that's the thing that's going to earn him plenty of opportunities is his really good shot. But, just like Hoffman, there's more to the game, right? So you might be relegated to like a third line role, power play, but not much even strength deployment if you can't hang and you can't handle the opponent's offensive opportunities. So those are the doubts that I have. If you look at hockey prospecting, he has some pretty nice upside still. He has a comp of Zibanejad, which I doubt that he ends up as good as Zibanejad, just because of the two-way potential there. But I do think that Alexander Holtz clearly has top line potential if you can mask some of his defensive issues. I ranked him 18th because I don't think Lindy Ruff is going to like his all-around game. A plus 3,000, I don't think he's a great bet, but if he can, have his warts masked, as I sort of have mentioned before, he certainly could score a lot. So maybe if he's with put him next to like Hischier, who's a strong two-way player, can mask some of those defensive liabilities, that could work. And then on that top power play with some really strong players, sure, their potential is certainly there. But that's why I have him at 18th, because I have some serious questions about him.
Yeah, it sounds like we'd want to hope that maybe, Dawson Mercer is like too good for his own good. And since he's like a strong two-way player, maybe he like goes onto the third line and plays like Eric Haula as like more of a solid, like, I don't know if you call it a shutdown line that can still potentially score. And then, yeah, like you're saying, maybe if they keep Hughes with Brad and Sharon Govich, then you feel like Hischier with Palat and Holtz. Like there's a situation where maybe Holtz could be in a decent offensive opportunity. But yeah, there's also definitely a situation where he just can't crack the top six because they do have, like I've just mentioned, a lot of good players that maybe deserve to be there more than him at this point. And yeah, then how about our friend over on the Leafs? It's been a while since the Leafs have had it's been a while since we've gone into a season thinking the Leafs have a Calder candidate. And so, but I know last year we did talk about Nick Robertson, then he ended up not making the team. So do you think things are going to be different this year?
I do. And I've often referred to him as Robertson the Lesser, even before Jason Robertson broke out. But that is Jason's little brother. He's failed to crack the lineup a couple of years. But, to be fair, the Leafs have a really strong forward bunch. And we talked about Bunting earlier. He was clearly a more ready, experienced player. And I think the Leafs, though, really this year, they want to see what they have in Nick Robertson. He has this year and next year left on his ELC. And of course, they're cap strapped. They would really like to have some cheap production from someone like a Nick Robertson. He was also a point per game for the HL Marlies last year. Yes, he's only 5'10", but he has a wicked shot. It's really tremendous. And the concern is that as a small forward, he lacks the skating of someone like a Gaudreau and a DeBrincat. But as our FHL scout Jeremy put it, he's a threat to score from anywhere in the offensive zone, both with and without the puck. Teams have to know where he is at all times, or he could make a tremendous pass or rip it home from just about anywhere. I've heard from a lot of the Leafs fans that I follow closely that have reasonable opinions about the team, that they think he's going to stick with the team all year. And if that happens with his shot and the strong offensive talent there, he could easily put up 50 plus points, which I think is what you're going to need to win the Calder, maybe closer to 60. At plus 3,000, I think that's pretty good odds. All it's going to take, you mentioned that there's a spot, maybe on the other side of Nylander on that second line. What if there's an injury, though? I mean, he could certainly, Nick Robertson could certainly slide into a really plush spot if one of those top forwards had a bit of an injury. I mean, yeah, Alex Kerfoot, I think he might be better than him at this point. So I have him 13th, Nick Robertson on my list at plus 3,000. That's a very reasonable bet, I would say.
Okay, yeah. So I guess, yeah, if we're looking at long shots, there's one that people can consider. Though now we get to even longer shots, including Lucas Reichel, who now that Chicago has traded away literally their whole team, he theoretically could be playing with Patrick Kane to start next season. So he's someone that obviously becomes interesting, though. I mean, how good can he really do? One sec. What did I miss? Edit point here.
You missed Marchenko.
He's not on this list that I'm looking at.
Oh, wait. No, he is. Is he not?
Well, I don't know. I just went to this website here.
Oh, you should be looking at the notes I sent you.
Oh, sorry. I just went to this website right now.
Yeah, Kirill Marchenko plus 3,000. So
all right. So here, I'll just go from when you finished with I'll just go from where you ended with Robertson.
Wait, you want me to go or you're
No,
gonna
no,
say?
I'll go. Sorry, I'm just kind of
Okay.
thinking what I'll say. Yeah, I guess. Let me think. What did I say before? My brilliant thing I said. Okay. I said, or I'll say something even better this time, actually. Yeah, I mean, I guess, at this point, you can't really go too wrong. Like, hopefully, you're not, banking too much on these like plus 3,000 or higher picks. But Robertson's someone, yeah, watching training camp. Let's see how things look. And maybe he's someone that you'll want to snag at the end of your fantasy drafts, at the very least, if it's looking like he's going to get a top six opportunity. All right. So we're past here the plus 3,000, I believe. Victor, who do you want to talk about next?
Well, we have one more guy plus 3,000, Kirill Marchenko. He's another
Ah,
Columbus player, and he was drafted back in 2018, second round pick. He signed a 3-year contract with SKA St. Petersburg right after being drafted. So that held him in the KHL for a long time. But this season, which was his last under contract, he told SKA that I'm not coming back. I'm headed to North America. He wants to be with the Blue Jackets. And that led to him getting kind of monkeyed around with, frankly. They played with his ice time. They gave him worse line mates. They didn't give him the best offensive opportunities, but you know what he did? He still scored 20 points in 39 games and then 8 points in 12 playoff games. So when they needed him, they put him out there as expected with good opportunity, and he did really well. So I think he kind of defied the odds with some of that playing around with his deployment. And I think, as we talked about earlier, the top 6 in Columbus got a lot better. Gaudreau, you got Line A year later, Kent Johnson, which we mentioned, 27th. And his professional experience, age 22, gives him a big leg up. He looks like a real star in the hockey prospecting model, 53% chance of being a star. He looks a lot in this model like Claude Giroux, which would be a pretty great outcome. Also comps to like Brock Besser, Dylan Larkin. And I just wanted to mention briefly, FHL scout Jeremy talks a little bit about Marchenko as an offensively gifted player, great hands and vision. Most exciting is his willingness to shoot the puck from anywhere on the ice, left dot, right dot, from the slot, wrist slap, one-timer. He's got all of it in his repertory. Really, really strong offensive player. The big issues are his skating. That might hold him back a little bit. I've been watching some of these rookie tournaments with him, and he certainly is a step behind some of the faster players, but he can keep up because he thinks the game's so fast. The other main worry is that he can certainly spend some time in the AHL. So maybe they want to get him acclimatized to the North American game, which he hasn't played at all. In fact, Elite Prospects has him listed as starting in the AHL, but training camp will say a lot about that. So at plus 3,000, I think it's a great bet. Maybe Marchenko, maybe he spends, 10 games or more in the AHL, but then gets called up and has a tremendous season in that top 6. So I have him all the way at 4th on my list. Again, I like these guys with professional experience, like the KHL. I like the guys that are a little bit older, being 22. I think that helps him a lot. And I think that he has tremendous offensive upside. Like there's no reason to play Marchenko in the bottom 6. He's not a great defensive player, but he's not terrible defensively like some of the other guys that we've mentioned who really struggle, and that's a big hole in their game. Like he's passable defensively. So as long as he plays with they have some pretty decent defensive centers. I think that he could be just fine on a line with any one of those guys, Corrali, Sillinger, Boone Jenner, whatever the case may be. So I really like Kirill Marchenko. And as you mentioned, Elon, that Columbus forward group is looking stronger and stronger.
yeah, man, I was already thinking of getting this Columbus hat. Now I think you sealed the deal. I have to get this hat. Look at this fun team. And yeah, it might be the kind of situation where we don't think of them as a top 6. It might be one of these top 9 teams, or like I guess it'll be like a clear top line. We've actually saw news today. I saw a tweet that Brad Larson said he's planning on starting Gaudreau and Line A together with Boone Jenner as the center, that they're going to give a couple other people an opportunity to try out for that center job. But yeah, after that line, you'll have one line with like Voracek and Nyquist and like centered by like Roslovic or Sillinger, let's say. Then you'll have the other one of Roslovic or Sillinger centering like a Kent Johnson and a Marchenko. And so that's just like 2 really good lines after that already good top line. So yeah, maybe we don't have to think about it as like, oh, is Marchenko good enough to crack the top 6? Maybe it's going to be just a situation where the second and third line are kind of the same in terms of total time on ice. So yeah, and I agree with you also. Someone that's a little bit older seems like there's a better chance that they won't have like these like sort of stumbles that rookies sometimes have. Though, like you also said, he has to like get acclimatized to playing in North America. But yeah, I think that's a really fun pick. And yeah, those odds at plus 3,000, I'll take that over Kent Johnson at plus 1,200 because it seems like maybe it could go either way. And maybe Marchenko is even the guy I'd be a little more confident in just because he's, a little bit older. Fun. Okay. So now we're getting to the real long shots, plus 4,000 and higher. Why not at this point? Why don't you just tell me like which players? I'll let you bring them up, and then feel free to talk as little or as long as you want about them, depending on how excited you are. I guess one guy that jumps out to me right away is Lucas Reichel, just because again, opportunity. Like Chicago got rid of all of their players, right? So it's like theoretically he could start the season playing with Patrick Kane, which is a very good thing. I still don't know if like that will be enough for him. Well, I'll be curious to know what you think of him just as a player overall, and also like on such a shallow team, even if you're playing with Patrick Kane, like how much can Chicago really score this year?
Those are all excellent questions. And yeah, let's start with Lucas Reichel because he is a fun player to talk about. He was the first round pick back in 2020, just finished his first North American seasons for the AHL Rockford Ice Hogs, and he was really good. That team does not have that AHL team. Sometimes you look at the AHL roster and you're like, oh yeah, they got a lot of pretty good experienced players. And no, it was pretty much Lucas Reichel driving everything. 57 points in 56 games, over a point per game. He also represented Germany internationally and did really well there. The reason I'm a bit lower on Reichel, though, is that I watched him a bunch in the AHL, and I really trust our lead scout, FHL scout, Caleb, on the matter. And the thing is, like, he's very fast, and he has pretty good NHL skills. All of his skills are good, but nothing is really elite or above average. So I see him as more of a middle six option, strong two-way player. He's going to be a pain in the butt to play against. He's going to drive play, but I'm just not sure he has that finishing. He has it in the AHL, but he's one of these guys when I look at him and I just say, that's not an NHL goal. That's not an NHL goal. That's not an NHL goal. So I'm a little worried that he can't translate that fully. Now, Patrick Kane can do a lot of things and mask a lot of those issues. So as you said, if he plays with him, sure. And, maybe Taves, although he seems to be a shell of his former self. So yeah, Chicago just doesn't have a lot to work with. So I'm a little worried. I don't know that they would load up with him and Kane. That might not work so well. I'm also worried because Reichel doesn't have the best bash. So for like fantasy, if you're considering him as a late round option, I'm just not sure that it's going to be there. They might put him as a, second or third liner and just kind of help drive some play, but also they're not trying to win. So like why, maybe they'll just have a good top line, get a lot of points and still lose games. That might be the plan. So yeah, Reichel, I'm a little bit lower on. I have him 24th just because of all the things I mentioned. I worry about the translatability and the pure offensive upside. At plus 4,000, I wouldn't make that bet, even though that's great odds. The other guy, there's two other guys here. Wyatt Johnston is one. I don't think we have to say a whole lot about him. He was taken last year, 2021, 23rd overall by Dallas. He had an incredible season after missing all of the previous OHL season. Wyatt Johnston had 124 points in 68 games, nearly 2 points per game for the Windsor Spitfires. Was also not a great OHL team, so he really did a tremendous amount of legwork for that team that didn't have a whole lot of other talent. But he's really young. He's 19 and he's not going to be 20 until May. And so he can't go to the AHL. It's NHL or back to the OHL. And I just don't think he's ready. He has some significant two-way holes in his game. So Wyatt Johnston, I don't think he plays more than 9 games. So I have him all the way down at 25th. I don't think he's a great bet. The guy that I do think is a good bet that's plus 4,000 is Simon Edvinsson. Simon Edvinsson, who was taken by Detroit back in 2021, 6th overall. And he just put up 19 points in 44 games for Frölunda, and one of the best SHL teams as a 19-year-old. Stop me if this all sounds familiar to last year, Elon. A strong SHL defenseman who is pretty young, but did tremendous in a really strong role for a really good team in the SHL. Like Mo Seider is what I'm saying.
Yeah, he also drafted by Steve Yzerman.
Also drafted by the Red Wings, yeah. The thing about Edvinsson, too, is that he had over a hit and over a block with 2 shots in the SHL. He is going to be elite for Bash. He is going to just rack up those peripheral stats. Even if he doesn't score that much, he is going to be valuable. He has a pretty good role model there, too, with Mo Seider in terms of how to perform to win the Calder. He might have some of that opportunity sucked away by Seider, though. Looking at hockey prospecting, I really think this comp is funny because I remember in his draft season, I called him the Swedish Rasmus Ristolainen because of some of his decision-making. And that's actually the guy he looks the most like in this model, Ristolainen, who's considered a fringe star. And we remember all those days with strong peripherals and good points in Buffalo. And I think that Edvinsson has come a long way with his decision making. And the thing that maybe holds him back a little bit is that he might start in the AHL. It's gotten a little crowded in Detroit. They made some offseason signings, but I think he's already close to, if not already, one of the top 4 best defensemen in Detroit, even though he's never played a game in that uniform, which is something I said about Seider last year. And it was more true than even I mentioned. So, who's better than him? Well, clearly Mo Seider, I would say. Ben Sherratt, probably. Hronek is probably similar. So he's maybe like the 3rd or at worst 4th best defenseman already on the team. I'm just not sure if the Wings can score enough to make him a Calder candidate. But I will say this, Elon. We had Mitch Brown of EP Ringside on our podcast, and we were talking about the offensive upside and who runs the power play in 2 to 3 years and has the most offensive upside. He said it's Simon Edvinsson. He's going to take that away from Mo Seider. He has better decision-making and vision and offensive upside in terms of the shot and everything. Hard to imagine right now. And I don't think there's any way that happens this year, but he is that good. And so there's really a scenario where Edvinsson comes in and maybe plays on the top power play with Seider, who has a great shot, and maybe Edvinson's more of the quarterback. I could see him getting 40 to 50 points this year and having a back-to-back Calder winner in Detroit. That would be super fun. I have him 5th on my list, and at plus 5,000, I can't imagine a better bet than Simon Edvinsson for the Calder.
Hey, okay. And also sounds like with these peripherals, someone you may want to look at in your fantasy leagues, especially if you're in like a categories league that counts hits and blocks. Again, we'll have to see if he makes the team. But if he does, then yeah, definitely someone to grab. Or if, like you said, he starts in the AHL, but maybe gets called up at some point, maybe you need to rush to grab him for those peripherals. And you're saying there's points there. I don't know, though. I mean, are we really like Mo Seider all of a sudden losing this shine? Like I thought we were just talking about this guy as like one of the best defensemen. Like everyone's so excited about how amazing Mo Seider is. Like, isn't he going to get better as well? So I'll be surprised if already like we're talking about someone else is even better. But I guess other people know more than me. I always just had this assumption that Seider is like the underrated one that now everyone's realizing is so amazing. So I got to wrap my head around now the fact that Seider's already old news. You're 21, Mo Seider. Get out of the way. It's time for Simon Edvinsson, I guess. So any other guys here? Now we're getting into like the really crazy long shots. Anyone in this list that you think is worth talking about as having a decent chance to, if not win the Calder, then at least do something? Like, someone that, let's put it this way, someone that well, I guess you'll likely talk about these guys even if they're not in the NHL on your podcast. But on my podcast, where I generally talk about just players who are actually playing in the NHL during the regular season, is there anyone left that you think is going to get a mention as someone we're saying people might want to stream in at some point?
Yeah, I think there are 3 guys that I would mention. 2 of them had odds, and then 2 of them didn't because he's a little too old. And so the first one I want to mention, I already talked about him briefly, and that's JJ Peterka. JJ Peterka, who was a Buffalo draft pick from 2020, 34th overall. As I mentioned, I watched some Rochester American games because I was really interested to see what Jack Quinn was doing. I wanted to see if it was kind of smoke and mirrors or whether he had really kind of proved everyone wrong, as you sort of alluded to, like everyone's saying, oh, you took the wrong guy and you should have had Rossi, which I still believe. But what I came away from that watching those games is that JJ Peterka is a stud, and he is an awesome two-way player. He was much more impactful on the game than Jack Quinn by far. I mean, there were times where I didn't even really realize Jack Quinn was out there, if there wasn't a scoring chance or something happening. Peterka's game is so mature. I can see him just stepping right into the NHL and being an impact player. We talked so much about Jack Quinn and how good a season he had. Well, JJ Peterka had 68 points in 70 AHL games and was over a point per game in the playoffs. He was the reason they went as far as they did in the AHL playoffs. It wasn't Jack Quinn. It was JJ Peterka. And our FHL scout, Danique, mentions a little bit about him too. Great elite skating play driver with hockey IQ and a motor that doesn't stop. In fact, Mitch Brown called his motor elite. He's a dual threat in the offensive zone, great passer and effective shooter, and he projects safely as a reliable, defensible player. He's someone that the coaches are going to love. And that's the thing, too, is that when you're a young player, a lot of coaches tend not to like young players. Why? Because they don't give effort on both sides of the puck. They're maybe a little bit unreliable. That is not going to be the case for JJ Peterka. Coaches are going to absolutely love him. They're going to put him out in more situations than he's probably ready for, but he's going to handle it really well because he's just that strong of a player. So I love JJ Peterka. I ranked him 12th on my list because I believe in him so much. I just think that he's going to force his way onto the team and he's going to play pretty decent minutes already as a rookie. So you want me to just go through the other two real quick?
Well, yeah, I'll just say that's very exciting. And again, I was already listing some players on Buffalo when I was saying how like it might be hard for Jack Quinn to crack the top six. So now this is another team kind of like Columbus, where I'm just kind of curious to see if maybe this is the year where they finally aren't like a joke and like are like an actual team that could do well and like potentially challenge for the playoffs or something, I guess, because we've already talked about Power and Dahlin, so strong D. We're talking about all these good forwards, like potentially. I guess we'll see how good Paterka, and I guess you're not so confident about Jack Quinn. I guess the goaltending though, man, what are they going to do there? Craig Anderson and Eric Comrie, and then are you into UPL? Do you think he's got a chance to be a stud? Like he's another potential Calder candidate, right?
No, I don't think so. I think that there are a lot of people that are excited about Eric Comrie. I mean, I kind of agree with you. I think it's going to be bad. I think it's probably going to be Comrie and he'll be, have some decent times, but mostly kind of struggle just because of the whole team. I still like UPL. I still think he can be like maybe a 1B in the league, but I think the shine is off him. It's Devon Levi in Buffalo. That's the guy that's going to be probably the long-term starter, but he's still a couple of years away.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So who else do you have that's someone we should have our eye on for next season?
Kalen Addison is another guy that I would mention. He's the offensive defenseman whose defensive game has come a really long way. When he was drafted back in 2018, 53rd overall, he was one of these offensive guys. He's a right shot D. He's a little bit undersized, and there was concerns about his two-way game. Well, he played 178 minutes in the NHL this season, and his offense was good. He had high expected goals, but his defense was well above average, better than 80% of his NHL counterparts. So he's an offensive defenseman whose defensive game has come a long way. He also had 34 points in 43 AHL games in Iowa, and he's clearly the most offensively gifted D-man on the Wild. I mean, if you think about it, there's Spurgeon, of course, but they really haven't had that super high offensive guy in Minnesota. And so he's that guy. And he was also third last season in expected goal differential behind Brodin and Spurgeon as a rate stat. That's remarkable because those guys are really good. And so this tells me that he's ready for more responsibility in Minnesota. And I think he's probably one of these guys that's like a Kevin Shattenkirk, third pairing, but like top power play kind of guy in his prime kind of thing. And so obviously that would be really good with that really good Minnesota power play with, Kaprizov, Zook, and all those guys. So I think Kalen Addison has the opportunity, if he gets it, to really run away with, a lot of points this season.
Yeah, I mean it's wild that I still remember. Oh, wild, huh? Get the pun there, but I still remember when Matt Dumba. I was like so sure he was like the future stud D on this team, but I guess things have definitely changed there. And Addison, fun fact, he was part of the return for Jason Zucker back when he got traded to the Penguins. I think on the podcast we were just talking about Galchenyuk for Zucker, and then there was a first involved. I wonder what that first turned out to be. I guess I could go look that up. I'll look that up while you're talking about your next guy. But yeah, it's interesting that now Kalen Addison could turn out to be the real like prize of that trade if he ends up being as good as you're thinking. And yeah, definitely there's room here on this Minnesota depth chart. They've brought in like Jacob Middleton, who's obviously more of a defensive guy that can maybe be in the top pairing. Then aside from that, yeah, Brodin and Dumba, and then Kalen Addison and Alex Goligoski makes up a pretty nice D depth chart for a team that's going to try to go for it again this year. So okay, that's Kalen Addison. Probably not going to win the Calder, but maybe someone you'll want to look at for your fantasy leagues deep down at the end of the drafts if he is actually getting a little bit of offensive minutes and D is hard to come by. All right. I know there's a guy that's not Calder eligible that I'd imagine you're going to want to talk about out of Vancouver, right?
That's right. And his name is Andrei Kuzmenko. He is an import player from Russia. He was not drafted. Vancouver signed him. He's 26 years old. So since he was 26 before September 15th, which is the Calder deadline, he is not Calder eligible. But we figured we just mention him because he probably should be drafted in your league. He was amazing last season for Scott St. Petersburg, 53 points in 45 games. Before that, he had some pretty good seasons, points in the 30s, which they only play like 60, 55, 60 games. So that's still really good. And I wanted to get a little bit of a closer look and take on this. So I asked our lead scout, Caleb, to take a look at him. And he says that his skating is excellent, near elite with good top end speed, very creative with the puck, was near perfect with every backhand sauce pass he saw. Great IQ, high tolerance for forechecking pressure, which is going to be important for him to translate to the NHL. And defensively, he's just okay, not a liability. So he should be really good. Of course, we have to really worry about these guys that play for SKA because it's such a good team and they generally put these guys in a really strong position. And sometimes, it's just their numbers are kind of inflated. So in terms of a comp, Caleb says he kind of sees shades of somewhere between Jeff Skinner and Pavel Buchnevich, which would be nice. Buchnevich obviously doing really well now. And there's definitely some high upside there. Could be a really good late round steal. Of course, it depends in Vancouver where he slots. I think probably the most realistic position is kind of like a middle six. I don't think he's a top line forward, but the question is, does he get, Bo Horvat or JT Miller as his center, or is he going to be down on the third line with like Jason Dickinson or Podkolzin, those kind of guys? And obviously if he gets power play time. So I think Kuzmenko certainly could, get close to that 60-ish point, which is kind of what you look for a Calder candidate, although he's not Calder eligible. But if you're drafting at the end of your draft as someone who maybe has upside for 70, he's a pretty decent option and probably someone that is not on too many people's radar.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll be able to get him in the last round in a lot of drafts if you want to take a swing. And maybe by the time you do that draft, you'll have some information from training camp. Like there's been rumblings once again, just like last year, that maybe they go with like Miller, Horvat, and Pettersson all playing C on separate lines. And if that happens, then Kuzmenko does get a really good center. They brought in Ilya Mikheyev in the offseason. I guess if you're predicting that Kuzmenko is going to get like 60 points potentially, do you think that he has higher upside than Mikheyev next year?
Well, it all depends on who gets the power play time. And
Right.
We're probably talking power play 2 here. I don't think either of them are going to get power play 1. I think it depends who plays most of their even strength shifts with Bo Horvat too, because I don't know that either of them are going to play with Miller. But whoever gets more time with Miller or Horvat, it's all about the opportunity. I think they're both kind of even in terms of like what their upside is. It just really depends on who gets that. So it's just something you have to follow at Game Day Lions, right, Elon?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we'll keep people posted, and obviously we'll talk about it on the podcast as well. Okay, man, we've talked about so many rookies, and there's still more people that you think might be interesting.
Oh, actually, not really. That was kind of the last one.
Oh, what are you gonna say? You still think interesting, or have we finally scraped the bottom of the barrel here?
I think that's kind of the bottom of the barrel. Yeah, there's other guys to talk about. I have other guys on my list. Do you want me to just read them real quick?
Yeah, how about you just name some guys and then I'll let you know if they were people that I thought maybe would have been better. Like I'll throw out one name right now. Like I think Stuart Skinner is kind of interesting and kind of similar to Logan Thompson, right? Like I guess like he's behind a more established guy in Jack Campbell, but Campbell has those injury troubles and also he really struggled at the end of last season. So Edmonton is obviously in their window. They need to win. They don't have time to like give Campbell like a ton of rope. So I'm sure they'll give him some rope. They just signed him to this like big contract. What was it here? Like 5 years, $5 million a year. But at the same time, I'm not saying, but I'm curious to know, is Stuart Skinner good? Like, do you think that if Campbell struggles, Skinner could step in and actually, earn a number one job? Or do you think he's kind of someone that probably at his height is more of a backup anyways?
Maybe we'll split the difference and say I think he's closer to a 1B. I do think he's a decent NHL goalie, Stuart Skinner, but I don't really think he's a starter. I think he certainly might be better than Jack Campbell if he's like Jack Campbell of the last part of last year where he was terrible. I think that, yeah, like you said, there's certainly an opportunity there for Stuart Skinner. And I don't think they'll hesitate to turn to him if Campbell really struggles. I have him 19th on my list. He's definitely the second goalie that I would put on there. I think he's got a decent opportunity. And yeah, overall, I think he's a serviceable goalie. And Edmonton, they have gotten a little bit better at protecting their goalies. They're not Toronto, which is why I worry a little bit about Jack Campbell. But yeah, he's definitely someone that I think is interesting. And I would just be I'm a little concerned about drafting Jack Campbell, frankly. I mean, I know he plays for a good team, but I think a late round, depending on how deep your draft is, Stuart Skinner pick may not be the worst thing.
Okay, so there you go. And if not, you'll probably be streaming him in. Like, anyways, like people always stream in backups in fantasy whenever they have like a good game that's announced. So it might be the kind of thing that one day someone will just get lucky, stream in Stuart Skinner, expecting it just be for one day, and then news will come out that Jack Campbell has injury and needs some time off. Next thing you know, you're gonna be really happy that you held on. So maybe if you're like deciding between a couple goalies for a 1 day spot start, maybe you like bump Skinner up a little bit just because there's always that chance, just because Campbell's older and has that injury history. All right. So yeah, do you want to just throw out the rest of the names of people that you think at least, I don't know, are worth mentioning somewhat that might be in the NHL?
Sure. Let me just go through my list too. So our patrons have access to all these, but so everybody hears it. I'm just going to go 1 through 10 and then I'll read the rest. So Matty Beniers 1, Owen Power 2, William Eklund 3, Kirill Marchenko 4, Simon Edvinsson 5, Kent Johnson 6, Marco Rossi 7, Cole Perfetti 8, Logan Thompson 9, Mason McTavish 10. Do you have any comments on those 10?
I guess we've already talked through those guys. I think I'm definitely with you with Beniers number one, and I guess I gave some reasons for like some ones over the others as we went, but overall seems like an exciting list for sure. Are you just going to keep going past the 10?
Yeah, I'll keep going. So 11, Kalen Addison, we just mentioned him. JJ Paterka at 12, just mentioned him. Nick Robertson at 13, Shane Wright at 14, Jake Sanderson at 15, Thomas Bordeleau at 16, Jack Quinn at 17, Alex Holtz at 18, Stuart Skinner at 19, and the other guy we haven't talked about, Jacob Pelletier at 20. He's a Calgary prospect who lit up the AHL last season, a little bit undersized, former top prospect, and Jacob Pelletier certainly has a strong opportunity to make the Flames roster. And if he does, of course, they have some pretty strong players there, and there's some opportunity that has opened up in that top 6, right? So there's definitely potential that Pelletier could be probably somewhere in that middle 6 and get some pretty decent deployment. And, I don't know that he has 60-point upside this season, but he certainly does long-term, maybe even more than that.
Yeah, and hey, we just talked recently on a show about how, let's say they go with Lindholm to Foley, Huberdeau line 1, then Kadri goes with Mangiapane and you have to think for a second, like, who is that second? Kind of like similar to with Perfetti, right? Like that 6th person in the top 6. I guess it could be Dylan Dubé, it could be like Blake Coleman, but Mikhail Backlund. Like, it kind of seems like Coleman, Dubé, Backlund seems like a good third line. So why not just get Pelletier if he's like a really high pedigree, exciting rookie? Maybe get him started with Kadri and Mangiapane and see how they do. So this is definitely going to be something where you're going to want to watch those training camp lines. And yeah, could be a decent situation for him. And I'll be curious to see how that goes. So yeah, okay. And that rounds out your top 20.
Yeah. And then I have a bottom 10 here, which I'll just mention. Yuri Slafkovsky, 21. We talked about him. Kravtsov at 22. Talked about him. Lucas Reichel at 23. Wyatt Johnson at 24. We talked about those guys. And then there's 6 guys here we didn't talk a whole lot about. So maybe I'll just mention them briefly. Shane Pinto, Ottawa prospect, has played some NHL, but also has had some injuries. The question, where does he fit into that lineup in Ottawa? That's going to be a little bit tricky. Ben Myers, who's a Colorado prospect who was not drafted and played in the NCAA and just came into the Avs. The obvious excitement is that the Avs are a great team and there's some opportunities there opened up with some players that left. So, I mean, maybe he gets great opportunity and puts up a lot of points. I don't see that happening. I think he's more of a bottom 6 guy. Dylan Holloway at 27, who, has some opportunity there in Edmonton, but I think he's more of a bottom to middle 6, and I'm not sure he's quite ready. Philip Broberg, who's a Edmonton defenseman who came a long way. He's the guy that was taken right before Trevor Zegras. So of course, Edmonton fans are super mad about that still because they could have had Zegras and McDavid, and yeah, that would be amazing. But Broberg, for his own, has come a long way and looks like a pretty decent middle pairing guy. It's just kind of crowded on the back end there in Edmonton, so I'm not sure that he gets a whole lot. And then 2 Habs, Justin Barron and Jordan Harris. Barron, I think, is someone who is probably has a little bit more upside, and maybe he pushes his way all the way to the top of the lineup this season. I just don't think there's enough to work with in Montreal, and even though he's a good player, I don't think his offensive upside individually is that great. So he'd need a great situation around him to put up a lot of points, and I just don't see that happening this season.
Okay, well, I'm just happy that you have named one player on my dynasty team. So all my hopes are pinned on Philip Broberg to prove you wrong. And then Matty and I are going to be so excited to have a Calder winner, along with hopefully a championship team.
There you go.
Man, I'm looking through my team right now, thinking if there's someone I could ask you about here. But no, they all are not that great.
It's a tradition. You always ask me about somebody, so you have to.
All right. Well, Daniil Gushin is someone on the Sharks that I don't know. I've seen some good things written about him. He's probably not going to make the team. I have like some rookies that I'm excited about, like long term. I drafted Marco Kasper and Pavel Mintyukov in our most
Ooh,
recent draft. But
now we're talking. Now those guys are exciting. And Casper is a guy who, you know, Stevie Y, right? We've talked about it. Sider, Edvinsson, Marco Casper is going to be the next. You should all taken him earlier because he's really this good, you know. So I love Marco Casper. I think he's pretty underrated, and he's probably not be as outstanding as Sider has been in terms of breaking out. But I think give him 2 or 3 years, he's going to be really good.
all right,
Gushin,
sweet.
Gushin is a guy. I mean, he needs to play in the AHL, but he has probably. I mean, with Eklund, he probably has the best like puck skills of any Sharks player. He's just small and he's not as good away from the puck. So he just needs to become more consistent, like all around game. But yeah, the potential with Gushin is certainly there. He's a very good offensive player. And who was the other one? Oh, Minchikov. Yeah. Pavel Minchikov is the best offensive defenseman in that 2022 draft class. The issue is that he's kind of an adventure the rest of the time when he doesn't have the puck. So he's not like terrible defensively. He's not like Jeremy Poirier who just doesn't play defense at all. He's okay. He just needs to get a little bit better, round out his game. But yeah, Anaheim also has a bunch of good defensemen with Drysdale and Zellweger and now Minchikov. So it might get a little crowded. Maybe one of them gets moved. But yeah, Minchikov is definitely, it's going to be, a couple of years. Maybe it's into your rebuild time, Elon, but then you'll really like Minchikov.
Yeah, or maybe I'll just trade him to try to keep my window open.
There you go.
But that would probably not be a smart move. Yeah, actually, to get those 2 picks, Maddie and I traded Jacob Chikrin. So we decided to actually, even though we're still going for it, we figured we might as well look a little bit to the future, especially getting up against the cap. We also got Justice Anunin, who I guess you didn't bring up because Colorado is already.
Well, they have Georgiev and Pavel Franco. So if both of them are terrible or get injured, Anunin is definitely. I was really impressed with our FHL scout Cam, who's our goalie scout. He really liked Anunin. He thought he did really well, even though some of his raw numbers look not as good. When you watch the games, he's got some really good habits. He's a big dude.
Okay.
So yeah, Anunin still has, I think, starter upside. Probably not this year or next year because they have the contracts in front of him, but he's definitely a decent guy to have.
I'll take that. Okay. And Maddie's actually in the chat right now telling me that I got to bring up Topi Niemela. Isn't everyone so stoked about him one day becoming a big deal on the Leafs?
Yeah, I like Topi Niemela. I think he's a good player. And I mean, I think part of that is your typical people are overexcited about Leafs prospects, which definitely happens out there in hockey Twitter. But he is really good and he did really well in Finland this season. I was a little disappointed with his World Junior tournament. I thought that he was like the best defenseman in the last tournament and he wasn't as good. And I just, well, obviously there's a lot of people in front of him, it depends on what they do with Rasmus Sandin. I sure hope they don't, for their sake, hope they don't trade him, but for his sake, I hope they do, because he's a really good player. But, Riley's not going anywhere. Liljegren's come a long way. When is it going to be time for Topi Niemela? I don't know. So if he gets there and he gets the opportunity, of course, he could be great. I think he's probably more of a second pairing guy. I don't know if he's a full top pairing, and he's good offensively, but he's not Morgan Riley. He's not like that great. So yeah, it's possible. He could really turn out.
You're being nice. I'll take it. Yeah, I guess I don't know if people are so excited about hearing about my middling prospects. So you have said that, yeah, maybe I have some good long-term ones. You still have a bunch of, when we started this league, you just decided to go all in on not trying and just like losing and getting all the top picks. And now it's starting to get pretty interesting. I'm curious to see. I guess you're still going to try to lose one more year to go.
I'm gonna win Bedard because in our league you have to win the consolation, and I finished last the first 2 years, but ended up with the third pick because I couldn't win a single consolation round. But this year, I'm hoping that, I have Matt Murray on my team, which is funny. Everyone's coming after me and wanting Matt Murray, and I don't know why I would trade him for pennies on the dollar because now he's he's got a good opportunity, right? This is why in cap leagues, your cap space is a weapon. I took on Murray when no one wanted him, and I just was like, yeah, I'll take him. We'll see what happens. Then he signed to Toronto, and I was like, yeah, now I have a great player. I could do what I want with him. I could trade him, or I could just keep him for the consolation playoffs and try to win.
Yeah. So this is like, I'm your opponent. So obviously you'll just have to trust me that I'm not trying to like give you bad advice or something, but like, I think you should probably trade Matt Murray because I think he's going to get injured soon and that trade value is going to plummet to the ground. So if you could get like a good first or whatever from him, I think I would just do it now. But maybe I'm just being too pessimistic about this
Well,
guy.
he does have a big contract though, so that's the issue. Is nobody wants to give me anything really good for him because it's kind of a big cap hit, you know. And I can't. Usually, you can retain salary in this league, but I already have too many retentions. So if I could retain salary and trade him for a ton, I would do that, but I can't.
All right, fair enough. Okay, well, he'll be a fun guy to watch next year for sure. Well, I appreciate you coming on this show for our annual tradition. This has been so fun. It's been over a couple hours now because for people who have listened to both part 1 and part 2, we just went right away. All that we did in the meantime was Victor ate a sandwich, and then we got right back on it. So this has been a blast talking through like 30 plus Calder candidates, and I think I'll be pretty surprised if we didn't nail the winner in one of these. I don't know if we like predicted the winner, but we at least talked about it because that'd be pretty surprising otherwise. So yeah, Victor, maybe before I let you go, do you just want to let people know how they can follow all of your great work?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It was fantastic as usual, Elon. I guess the first year I did it with Brian, so this is our second time. But yeah, we have our podcast, Jesse and I, Fantasy Hockey Life, which you've been on, and we're great friends and we appreciate each other. We just finished our team preview series, which is kind of similar to what you guys do, but we also kind of dig into a couple more prospects and have a dynasty dig and all that. So you can listen to that. We're also going to be doing some other things with like bringing on prospect guys over the course of the year. And so you can definitely check that out. We have a lot of stuff over on our Patreon too, like ranks and prospect. You know, you can see peripheral values and all kinds of stuff like that. And Elon, we have a league that's inspired by the cupful that we're calling the Tidy, the Tiered Dynasty, which is kind of like a promotion relegation, but for Dynasty. So that's the first year this has happened. If people are interested in that, you can DM me and kind of check it out. We're hoping to kind of build something as cool as what you've done with the cupful, but in a slightly more Dynasty, which doesn't exactly work for Dynasty, but it's sort of similar, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So we're looking forward to kicking that off this year. We did all our drafts and now we're getting ready to start the season. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Cool. Yeah, I'm very interested to follow along with that. I still don't fully get like how you do Dynasty with promotion and relegation, but I'm really going to be interested to see after year 1 how I feel like there's going to be people who win but like their team and they're like, I don't want to be promoted. I want to keep my good prospects. But I know you guys have put a lot of thought into it. I think it's going to be really cool to follow along and see the world's first ever tiered Dynasty League. As far as I know, I've never heard of one before, so it's really cool. And yeah, I love your podcast. Always fun. It's fun to go on. Looking forward to going back on again next year. I hope that wasn't like me throwing shade, by the way. I'm like genuinely interested, which is good, right? You want to be building some buzz around what you're doing.
Hey, I'm skeptical too. I don't know exactly how it's going to work. In my head, I feel like that beautiful mind gif. It all makes sense to me. But like people ask me questions, and I'm like, oh yeah, I don't know. We'll see. Like, yeah, it's not as easy as a redraft league. Like, there are definitely more things to think about. So, I think we figured out a really good plan. We have a bunch of people that kind of offered good feedback. I think it's going to work. But we don't know. We'll see.
We'll find out. Yeah. So people, I guess it's too late for this year, but I guess you'll announce in your podcast when spots open up for the next time. So yeah, thanks again for coming on. I guess let's cue that outro music. I don't think I've done that yet. So that's playing now. So the people listening to the audio version of this. And yeah, thanks everyone again for listening. We've got more content coming your way as we barrel towards the regular season. Once again, everyone in the Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Patron Fantasy League slow drafts, good luck. Hope you're having fun and doing well, and obviously reach out to all the commissions that are around to help you if you're having any issues. And yeah, hope that's just going smoothly. And Victor, I've got my auction draft for the couple coming in a couple weeks that I need to start preparing for. We'll see if I end up drafting one of these guys we talked about on this episode. But yeah, I guess until our next show, which will be coming at you in a few days, most likely just remember to do your best to continue the tradition of having fantasy hockey be for everyone. Bye. Cool.
Nailed it.
Did my best. It's Brian's job.
Yeah. Well, it's when Jesse and I are in our second or third hour, we get kind of brain dead from talking.
Yeah.
So.
And now I definitely need to go because I think
I know how it is.
I think I told her it was gonna be like an hour and a half. So but yeah, this is great. So good luck in your hockey game.
Awesome, man. Well, if I don't get to say this in person, I just want to say good luck to her and everything. It's going to be an exciting time for you and the baby when it comes.
Oh yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, I'll pass that along as my excuse. I'll be like, yeah, I know I went a long time, but Victor's a nice guy and he wished us well. So
There you
awesome.
go.
And
All right,
also
have a good one.
thanks to everyone in the chat, by the way, Maddie, Patty, Kalachan.